Chapter 456. Very quickly, the golden Buddhist light rushed before Wu Qi. A sandalwood aroma wafted into his face, soothing and calming his mind. The aroma was simple and elegant, yet it did not disperse. It was as warm as a clear spring in the woods, and it made one feel a slight coolness from head to toe. It was a sandalwood of the finest grade, refined by the Dharma. Amidst the golden light, a monk, standing 12 feet tall and with fair skin, was seen putting his palms together and bowing to Wu Qi with a smile. He was wearing a yellow kasaya, a pair of boots made of tiny pearls, and a Buddhist crown inlaid with jade on his head. Next to the monk stood a pair of young boys and girls, whose skin was as fair as snow, as if they were made from flour. Their hair was tied into tiny braids, and they were staring at Wu Qi with their big, round eyes. "Merciful Buddha! Excellent, excellent." The monk glanced at the mountainous pile of storage treasures before Wu Qi with his big, watery eyes, then bowed and said smilingly, "Fellow Taoist, there is a fate between you and the Buddha. I'm Arhat Bao Sheng, a disciple of the 3 lotus thrones and 6 arms demon subduing great Bodhisattva, a disciple of the great solar wheel glorious Buddha of the great solar heavenly mirror. The moment I saw you, fellow Taoist, I knew that there is a fate between you and the Buddha. In this life, fellow Taoist will belong to the Buddha. Another fate between him and the Buddha." Wu Qi felt a wave of annoyance in his heart. He smiled bitterly, pointed at the storage treasures and said mockingly, "Monk, I'll give you half of these treasures, and I'll no longer have any fate with the Buddha. What do you say?" Arhat Bao Sheng chuckled, then laughed almost instinctively and said, "Of course." But, right after he said that, he immediately realized that something was wrong. Under Wu Qi's mocking gaze, the monk's fair and clean face did not even blush. Instead, he smiled pleasantly and said, "Fellow Taoist, why are you teasing me? There is a fate between you and the Buddha. How can it be changed by mere external objects? Fellow Taoist, please convert sincerely and join my Buddhist sect. Then you'll be able to enjoy boundless scenery and boundless happiness. Wouldn't it be better than struggling bitterly in the mortal world?" After a brief moment of silence, under Arhat Bao Sheng's widened gaze, Wu Qi slowly put away all the storage treasures in front of him. Smilingly, he turned to Arhat Bao Sheng and asked, "May I ask, how many Buddhas are there in Buddhism League? You keep saying that Buddha is merciful, but how many Buddhas do you worship?" An Arhat was equivalent to a heaven immortal, a Bodhisattva was equivalent to a golden immortal, and a Buddha was equivalent to a primordial immortal. In all the heavenly realms, the number of famous and top-notch primordial immortals could be counted with 2 hands. Wu Qi was very curious about how many Buddhas and experts of the realm of primordial immortals there were in the Buddhist League. Arhat Bao Sheng smiled faintly and continued to spout nonsense without pausing. "Buddhism League is vast and full of profound mysteries. There are billions of heavenly realms in the universe, and each of them is guarded by a Buddha. This is the reason why there is a saying in the 4 billion heavens in the universe, the face of Buddha can be seen in all the heavens." Wu Qi stared coldly at Arhat Bao Sheng. This was a monk who talked nonsense. Wu Qi laughed mockingly and said, 4 billion heavenly realms? There are so many heavenly realms? And each heavenly realm is guarded by a Buddha? Doesn't that mean there are 4 billion primordial immortals in the Buddhist League? Monk, you really know how to spout nonsense." Putting on a straight face, Arhat Bao Sheng said solemnly, "I'm not spouting nonsense. I'm afraid fellow Taoist has never left Pangu continent in your life, so you have no idea about the magnificent scenery of Buddhism League in outer heavenly realms. There are 4 billion heavenly realms, and each of them is guarded by a Buddha. If fellow Taoist follows me to the great solar heavenly mirror, you can ask any Buddhist disciple, and you will get the same answer." Wu Qi shook his head and did not want to waste any more time on the monk. Every heavenly realm was guarded by a Buddha? At least, in the over 10,000 heavenly realms under Yuhua heavenly realm, he had never heard of a single Buddha. And in the region controlled by Yuhua heavenly realm, there was not even a single Bodhisattva. However, he heard that there were 3 to 5 Arhat realm Buddhist cultivators. Arhat Bao Sheng's words could not be trusted. With a cold snort, Wu Qi put away the last storage bracelet, then turned to the cultivators in Qing Su Immortal Square and snapped, "That's enough. I won't go too far today, and I won't really rob you of everything you have. Remember, in the future, the world is a vast place, and there are countless capable and extraordinary cultivators. It is not a place where you can do whatever you want." With a flick of his sleeve, without giving Arhat Baosheng another look, Wu Qi spun and flew towards the Great Hall where he registered his identity and received his identity certificate. There was only one voice-transmitting formation in Qing Su Immortal Pass that could communicate with outer heavenly realms in real time, and it was located in that Great Hall. It was built by the officials of Yu Dynasty and was specially used by immortals, cultivators, and sects from outer heavenly realms to send messages. Of course, the cost of using the voice-transmitting formation was very high, as it consumed the energy of several hundred upper-grade energy stones for just the time it took to finish a pot of tea. On the other hand, the officials had always charged around 1,000 upper-grade energy stones, which was a profiteering method. However, the cost of creating a voice-transmitting formation that could communicate with outer heavenly realms in real time was enormous, and the core of the formation required a dark-tuned divine stone, which was thousands of times more precious than spatial breaching spirit gold. Ordinary immortal sects could not afford to create such a thing, so no matter how high the fee was, they could not do anything about it. Wu Qi left on a cloud without giving Arhat Baosheng another look. Arhat Baosheng's face darkened as he cried out furiously, "Don't you think you are being too rude, fellow Taoist?" With a move of his right arm, Arhat Baosheng's arm suddenly grew to about 2 miles long. Like a flexible rubber snake, it shrouded a large sheet of golden light as it grabbed towards Wu Qi's shoulder. Specks of golden light shot out of Arhat Baosheng's fingers, while swastikas could be vaguely seen on his fingertips. The palm strike carried a force of over 10 million kilograms, and together with Arhat Baosheng's restrictive divine ability, it was more than enough to imprison an ordinary heaven immortal. But Wu Qi was not an ordinary heaven immortal. With a shake of his body, he began to teleport within a small area. Every time he teleported, he would only move a distance of 30 to 50 feet. Then, a series of ear-piercing whistles kept ringing out, and the space within 1,000 feet was filled with Wu Qi's flashing and blinking. Arhat Baosheng grabbed 3 times in a row, but failed to touch Wu Qi's body. He could not help but fly into a rage. He roared, "You're going too far. Fellow Taoist, since you don't know what's good for you, don't blame me for being merciless and wiping out your evil fiend league." Taking a deep breath, Arhat Baosheng suddenly roared like a lion, "How dare you rob Qing Su Immortal Pass? Do you still have any respect for your fellow Taoists and the Yu Dynasty?" After putting the blame on Wu Qi, Arhat Baosheng glared at him. A green cloud rose from the top of his head, from which came 3 fist-sized relics, rolling and wheeling above him. Beneath each relic was a lotus throne that was emitting a large sheet of green light, resonating with the boundless glow emanating from the relic. As soon as the relic appeared, a golden flame burst out from Arhat Baosheng's body. Surrounded by the Buddhist light, he looked like the legendary Vajra who could subdue all evil. His imposing manner made countless cultivators and mortals below him not dare to raise their heads, and they all dropped to their knees and bowed their heads deeply. With a wave of his right hand, a Vajra wheel appeared in his palm, shrouded in a crimson flame. With a loud cry, the monk was about to throw the wheel out. Right when the monk was about to strike, Wu Qi spun and lazily crooked his finger at the monk and said, "Monk, we are fated to meet today. I'm going to rob the Great Hall of Qing Su Immortal Pass, and rob them of all the energy stones they have accumulated over the years. If you are interested, then come with me. If not, then forget it." Arhat Baosheng stopped abruptly, and the Buddhist light shrouding him vanished as well, revealing his dignified and solemn face, which was devoid of any evil aura. He took a deep breath, put his palms together, and said in a deep voice, "Amitabha, fellow Taoist, aren't you afraid that the officials of Yu Dynasty will investigate this matter?" Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh, spread his arms lazily, and said with a wry smile, "I've killed Feng Qingya, and killed over 30 heaven immortals." Arhat Baosheng's eyeballs nearly popped out as he cried out in shock. You killed Feng Qingya? And killed those cow noses who stayed in Qingsu Immortal Square all year round? No wonder none of them showed up when I was fighting today. How should we split it? How about we split it 50-50? Shaking his head, Wu Qi stared coldly at Arhat Baosheng and said with a smile, 50-50? What a wishful thinking you have. 370, you take 30% and I'll take 70%. Arhat Baosheng hesitated for a long while, then clenched his teeth and said while shaking his head, at least 60-40. Otherwise, I'll be bringing shame to the Buddhist League. After a moment of silence, Wu Qi nodded slowly and said, so be it. Monk, you want to share for no reason, and you have to be the vanguard. I still want the voice transmitting formation in there. I'll sneak in and find it first, while you attack from the outside. With such a great prophet in front of him, how could Arhat Baosheng care so much? Feng Qingya was dead, and so were the over 30 heaven immortals who stayed in Qingsu Immortal Square all year round. Therefore, Arhat Baosheng no longer had any scruples. Elated, he agreed to Wu Qi's request, and immediately addressed Wu Qi as his brother, as if they were a pair of sworn brothers who had known each other for countless eons. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi rode a cloud and flew hastily towards the great hall of garrison of Qingsu Immortal Pass. As it was quite a distance away, the great hall of garrison of Qingsu Immortal Pass did not know what had happened in Qingsu Immortal Square. Cultivators were still coming from outside, and were being led into the hall by those officials of Yu Dynasty to get their identity certificates processed. Wu Qi pressed down on the cloud and walked straight towards the West Hall of Garrison, where the voice-transmitting formation was deployed. A few armored soldiers stopped Wu Qi, and one of them cried out sternly, "What are you doing here?" Pointing a finger at the West Hall, Wu Qi said coolly, "I'm here to send some news to the outer heavenly realms with the voice-transmitting formation." The man rolled his eyes as he gave Wu Qi a glance, who was clad in a plain outfit. Grinning coldly, he said, "You want to use the voice-transmitting formation with your appearance? Do you have enough energy stones? Without at least 1,000 upper-grade energy stones, don't even think about taking a step near the formation." Wu Qi shook his head. He glanced to the left and right, then casually waved his left sleeve and unleashed a sheet of raging flame that soared into the sky. A few men who blocked his way were burned to a crisp by the flame. Dozens of charred body parts flew far away and fell to the ground in disorder. All the soldiers and officials in the vicinity roared at the same time. Those who did not have the strength to fight retreated quickly, while those who had the courage to charge at Wu Qi with their blades and spears. But before they could get close to Wu Qi, a huge Vajra evil subduing ring hovered above his head, emanating a golden Buddhist light and wrapping around the several dozens of palaces in the great hall of garrison that occupied several hundred acres of land. Hovering midair, Arhat Baosheng, whose face was wrapped in a thick piece of black cloth and had a shifty-eyed face, bellowed furiously, "Ayaya! Listen up, all of you! Hand over the wealth of the people that you thieves have plundered over the years. If anyone dares to say no, I, the Buddha, have a sharp blade in my hand, and I'll kill them all." Wu Qi nearly fell to the ground. It seemed that Arhat Baosheng was very familiar with the terms used in robbing people. A deafening bugle rang out, as large groups of soldiers rushed out from all the palaces. Chapter 457. While Arhat Baosheng was fighting a fierce battle outside, Wu Qi was too lazy to pay any attention to him. His cultivation base was at least 33rd tier heaven immortal. Facing these human soldiers who had lost their commander, even if there were several tens of thousands of soldiers guarding this place, they would not be able to hurt even a single hair of Arhat Baosheng. After driving away the few Yu Dynasty officials who were guarding in front of the west entrance, Wu Qi pushed open the heavy stone door and walked into the hall. The hall measured 1,000 feet in both width and length, and was only about 70 to 80 feet tall. It was built entirely with black stones, and the lamplight in the hall was dim, giving it a very depressing atmosphere. In the corners of the hall where the lamplight could not reach, there seemed to be some kind of ghost, sighing faintly and silently. There were 24 stone pillars in the hall, each as thick as two people holding their arms around it. On top of these pillars were hung the skulls of strange beasts, which added a gloomy and murderous atmosphere to the hall. Wu Qi frowned. This hall had a history of at least 10,000 years. It was dimly lit all year round, and very few people came here. That was why it had accumulated such a strong energy. Presumably, the general who guarded this place had the intention to maintain such a situation. In such an environment, even a heaven immortal would feel depressed when he came here, and he could take the opportunity to ask for a few more energy stones, which was more or less an extra profit. Wu Qi smiled as he saw through the purpose of the grand hall's layout, then came straight to the center of the hall. 4 white jade pillars, each as thick as a water tank, stood towering in the center of the hall. They were about 50 feet apart from each other, forming a square space. Nearly 1,000 upper-grade energy stones were inlaid on the jade pillars, and golden runes were densely arranged on them. Wu Qi scanned through these golden runes with his divine will. Each rune was smelted using a few rare and precious materials, and had an excellent effect of guiding energy and resisting the pressure of space. 4 prismatic crystals were hovering in the air in the center of the jade pillars. They were pale green in color, glinting faintly and brightly, illuminating the small space. In the center of the 4 crystals was a strange stone, about the size of a human head. It seemed colorless, but if one were to look closely, it seemed to contain countless colorful lights and shadows, and vaguely, strange noises could be heard coming out from it. Profound sound divine stone. Wu Qi smiled. This piece of dark music god stone was worth tens of thousands of celestial stones. This type of dark tune divine stone was extremely rare. Even in the scroll of stealing, there were only 13 extremely dangerous places that could produce dark tune divine stone. It was fine if it was just dangerous. Naturally, there were powerful beings who could easily enter those dangerous places to mine the mystic sound divine stone. The problem was that the mystic sound divine stone required extremely harsh conditions and an extremely long period of time to be nurtured by the power of heaven and earth. This was something that not even the most powerful beings could pull up seedlings to help them grow. The so-called market value of tens of thousands of immortal stones was only the so-called market price. On the other hand, which power that truly obtained a piece of profound sound divine stone would be willing to exchange it for immortal stones? It was best to have such a strategic resource in hand. After carefully examining the complicated array map drawn on the floor of the Great Hall, Wu Qi exercised his mystic eyes of universe. After confirming that the array map had only drawn a layer on the surface of the floor and did not go deep into the ground, Wu Qi felt relieved and nodded. Since that was the case, he could take away the entire voice-transmitting formation. Apart from the dark tune divine stone in the center, the 4 sky crystals surrounding it were also valuable items, and the 4 jade pillars carved from the spirit-suppressing dark jade were even more valuable. The total cost of building this voice-transmitting formation was more than 100,000 immortal stones. After spending so much time swindling people and kidnapping people, the total number of immortal stones in Wu Qi's hands was less than 1,000. Glancing around, Wu Qi waved his hand and sprinkled out a large number of primordial runes. The primordial runes condensed from his energy flickered in the air for a while, then merged with the surrounding void and laid out several dozens of invisible soundproofing restrictive spells. The air had also begun to twist slightly. When outsiders looked at this place, unless they had cultivated a magical ability like the mystic eyes of universe, there was no way they could see Wu Qi's figure clearly. Quickly activating the voice-transmitting formation, the 4 sky crystals burst out with a strong light, agitating the dark tune divine stone and emitting a strange sound. Wu Qi pressed his right hand on a sky crystal and quickly used his divine sense to communicate with the formation runes inscribed in the sky crystal, transmitting a strange energy fluctuation frequency into it. The dark tune divine stone let out a soft buzzing sound, and the surrounding spirit-suppressing dark jade pillars burst out with an intense light. A huge amount of spiritual energy was extracted from the upper-grade spirit stones and continuously injected into the formation underground. In an instant, an extremely small gap was torn open in the void. Following the energy fluctuation frequency that Wu Qi had transmitted into it, The voice-transmitting formation set up at the core of the Green City Mountain Gate in the extremely distant Xianyang Heavenly Realm was activated. A white mist rose from the voice-transmitting formation, and a hazy figure of a white-bearded Taoist appeared in the white mist. "What's the matter?" the white-bearded Taoist asked quickly and hastily. The voice-transmitting formation consumed a huge amount of energy, as just a few words would cost several hundred upper-grade energy stones. Even though all the immortal sects were wealthy and powerful, such a consumption was still extremely painful. Therefore, all the executing disciples of the immortal sects who controlled the voice-transmitting formation had learned how to transmit the largest amount of information with the simplest words. "It's an important matter, Reverend Li Yang." Wu Qi answered the Taoist's question with a few simple words. "Shut down the formation, Reverend Li Yang," said the Taoist immediately. The voice-transmitting formation dimmed abruptly, and a crisp explosion was heard coming from the spirit-suppressing dark jade pillars behind him. During the short exchange between Wu Qi and the white-bearded Taoist, an upper-grade energy stone had completely depleted all its energy and exploded. Wu Qi could not help but twitch his lips. Sure enough, the voice-transmitting formation was a huge consumer of energy stones. How could ordinary small clans afford it? It was no wonder that Yuan Hua sect did not deploy a voice-transmitting formation like this. They simply did not have the capital to use such a luxurious item. Of course, Yuan Hua sect did not have the capital to build a voice-transmitting formation either. About 10 breaths of time later, the voice-transmitting formation lit up once again, and a middle-aged Taoist appeared amidst the white mist above it. The Taoist had an elegant and handsome appearance, and when Wu Qi laid his eyes on him, he actually had a misconception that he was the most gorgeous man among all the beauties. The Taoist was simply too good-looking. Not only did he have the face of a handsome man, each of his eyebrows, each strand of his hair, every frown and every smile, were perfect. There was nothing that one could find fault with. Even the wisp of beard on his chin did not make him look old, but added a sense of grace and steadiness to him. As for the wisp of beard, Wu Qi gave it a quick glance. Every single strand of beard was dark and shiny, without any blemish. "Junior Greed offers greeting, Senior." Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed deeply to Reverend Li Yang. "What is it? Tell me quickly." Reverend Li Yang put on a straight face and did not waste his breath on Wu Qi, but asked him the reason for activating the voice-transmitting formation. Wu Qi beckoned to the side. A celestial fiend puppet transformed into Shui and came before the voice-transmitting formation. Reverend Li Yang opened his eyes slightly as he nodded and said, "Ah, Shui, what is it? Tell me quickly." "Strange, why didn't you bring the voice-transmitting formation to Pangu continent? This magic formation of yours is rented from Yu Dynasty, isn't it?" Shui cupped his fist and bowed deeply, then told Reverend Li Yang the whole story with the quickest speed and the simplest words. Reverend Li Yang was overjoyed when he heard that. He was too lazy to pay attention to the personal struggle between Taoist Yunzong and Taoist Yunzong, and asked excitedly, "If that is the case, an area 1 million miles around Anhui City could become a mansion of Green City?" "It is not a possibility," Wu Qi answered respectfully. "It has already become a mansion of Green City. As long as I, together with Reverend San Lu, announce it to the people around Anhui City, we will be able to make Green City occupy an area 1 million miles around Anhui City in a reasonable manner and claim the entire Anhui County." Wu Qi paused for a brief moment, then smiled bitterly and said, "The only trouble is." Reverend Li Yang waved his hand in a heroic manner, then laughed and said, "Isn't the only trouble Patriarch Xian Yi of Dark Palace? There's no need to be greedy with them. I'll now invite the few elders to Pangu continent to attend the opening ceremony of Green City Mansion. If Patriarch Xian Yi has something to say, let him come to me." After a brief moment of pondering, Reverend Li Yang said seriously, "Of course, before we arrive, you have to be very careful. Do not let that Junior Muji plot against you. There is a great difference between immortals and fiends, and Huiming Heavenly Realm is very far away from Xianyang Heavenly Realm. If you are harmed, even Green City will not be able to ask for justice from Dark Palace. If that is the case, Anhui City will not be fated with Green City." Wu Qi and Chi Shui cupped their fists and bowed respectfully. Taoist greed? Reverend Li Yang said happily. You've done well, very well. Since you admire Green City so much, when I go to Anhe City, I'll take you as my personal disciple. Your contribution is worthy of such a reward. Wu Qi cupped his fists and bowed deeply once again. Taoist Li Yang roared with laughter, then turned off the voice transmitting formation. It was his last 3 laughs that depleted the energy of 2 upper-grade energy stones, causing them to explode and shatter into pieces. As soon as the formation was turned off, Wu Qi stretched out his hand and unleashed several dozens of restrictive spells, sealing the entire formation. After that, he twisted his body, and 3 celestial fiend puppets rushed out from his body. Together with Shui, they stood around the formation, thrusting their hands into the ground. With a light snort, they pulled out the ground 100 feet in circumference. A beam of black light shot out from the black dragon spirit ring and shone onto the voice-transmitting formation. Then Wu Qi placed the entire formation into it. After a few loud laughs, Wu Qi retracted all the celestial fiend puppets and rushed out of West Hall. Corpses were strewn everywhere outside the hall. At least 10,000 soldiers were killed on the spot. Huge cracks and holes could be seen everywhere on the ground. Arhat Baosheng was laughing as he received a large storage bracelet from a few black-clothed officials. His face fell when he saw Wu Qi rushing towards him. Without hesitation, he grabbed the storage bracelet and spun, preparing to leave. Not allowing Arhat Baosheng to flee, Wu Qi came before him with a blink. He opened his mouth and spat out the acquired Earth Spirit Pearl with a loud buzzing sound, rolling up a monstrous magnetic force and smashing it out. The gravity in the surroundings suddenly increased by 1,000 times. Arhat Baosheng's body turned stiff, and his flying speed suddenly became no different than an ordinary human walking. With his face turning pale, Arhat Baosheng forced a smile and handed the bracelet over to Wu Qi. Fellow Taoist, this is. Wu Qi took the bracelet with a carefree attitude, then stared at Arhat Baosheng and said with a cold smile, I thought you would run away with the money. Arhat Baosheng's eyes went wide as he cried out furiously, a disciple of the Buddhist League never lies. Since we have agreed on a 60-40 split, how could I do that? You damn Taoist. Wu Qi moved very quickly. While Arhat Baosheng was trying to cover his embarrassment with words, Wu Qi suddenly glared at him. A beam of purple light flew out from his wrist and tied up Arhat Baosheng tightly. Not waiting for Arhat Baosheng to break free from the spirit-restricting rope, Wu Qi picked up a golden axe he robbed from Mr. Gold and swung it down forcefully. Suddenly, a lotus flower burst out from Arhat Baosheng's body, pushing the spirit-restricting rope far away. However, when Wu Qi swung the axe down, it still landed on his shoulder, nearly severing his arm. Wu Qi snorted coldly. With a wave of his right hand, he tore the black cloth covering Arhat Baosheng's face, then spun and left. Arhat Baosheng stamped his feet and cursed furiously, while Wu Qi burst out laughing from a distance. I am Arhat Baosheng, the disciple of the 3 lotus thrones and 6 arms demon subduing great Bodhisattva, a disciple of the great solar will brilliant Buddha of the great solar heavenly mirror. Amidst Arhat Baosheng's exasperated roar, Wu Qi had long fled far away. Chapter 458. After tricking Arhat Baosheng before leaving, Wu Qi was laughing all the way. As for whether Arhat Baosheng would kill him or flee after hearing the news, it was none of his business. As Wu Qi had shouted with all his strength, all the several million people inside and outside of Qingsu Immortal Pass had heard him. How could Arhat Baosheng kill so many people in Qingsu Immortal Pass? After laughing all the way, Wu Qi opened the storage bracelet and gave it a glance with his divine will. What he saw made Wu Qi's heart twitch violently. The general who guarded Qingsu Immortal Pass was so fat. There was a huge pile of immortal stones in the bracelet, and none of them were below middle-grade energy stones. Instead, they were all upper-grade and supreme-grade energy stones. In total, there were more than 500,000 upper-grade energy stones. Since Feng Qingya was the overseer of Qingsu Immortal Pass, all those who came and went would have a layer of skin flayed. On top of that, he took a commission from Qing Su Immortal Square, collected taxes, and received the gifts from others, so these energy stones were really not a lot. As Qing Su Immortal Pass was a huge place, all the cultivators from the surrounding 300 provinces would come here to trade. How huge would the annual trade volume be? It was a pity that the energy stones in Qing Su Immortal Pass's storehouse had to be submitted to Yu Dynasty's national treasury every 3 years. Otherwise, Wu Qi's harvest would be even greater. He took a deep breath. The amount of energy stones and immortal stones in the bracelet was nearly 10 times more than Wu Qi's entire wealth. For a moment, Wu Qi felt that he should go to the other few immortal passes and immortal squares established by Yu Dynasty to test the waters. If it was convenient for him, he really wanted to rob all of them. Smacking his lips, he shoved all the energy stones and immortal stones, as well as other precious items that piled up like a mountain, into the Black Dragon Spirit Ring. After that, Wu Qi let the ring devour the storage bracelet as well, completely destroying all the evidence. With a sway of his body, his Taoist robe, undergarments, boots, socks, and even the hairband on his head were ripped to shreds. The Black Dragon Spirit Ring spat out a brand new moon-white Taoist robe, a pair of white deerskin boots, and a towering crown inlaid with gold and jade on his head. He tied a jade belt around his waist, held a rui scepter carved out of spirit jade in his hand, and had a horsetail whisk made of heavenly worm silk with a handle made of purple gold inserted into his collar. After that, he changed his appearance and transformed into a Taoist with a fair and clean face. Quietly, he exercised his cultivation technique and released a tiny bit of the fiend energy from his inferno nether nascent soul. Together with the cold energy exuded by the fake nascent soul who was cultivating the Dark Een water scripture, he was shrouded in an immense evil aura and a threatening cold air. Coupled with his magnificent appearance, anyone with a discerning eye would know that he was not someone to be trifled with. After that, he assumed a stance of keeping everyone away from him, then stepped on a cloud and flew quickly towards Anhe City. When he was about to reach the shore of the Great Lake, Wu Qi suddenly thought of Feng Qingwu, whom he bumped into on his way here. After hesitating for a brief moment, Wu Qi took a detour, planning to detour around the 10,000 miles wide forbidden zone set by Feng Qingwu and her people. He did not want to bump into that unruly girl again and get himself into trouble for no reason. But when trouble came knocking on his door, it was useless to avoid it. Wu Qi kept a great distance away from the place where he had a conflict with Feng Qingwu. As a result, he took a detour of over 30,000 miles, and right when he stepped onto the shore of the lake, a large shadow loomed over Wu Qi's head. Raising his head in surprise, Wu Qi saw a gigantic bird with a wingspan of over 10 miles, struggling to fly past him. The bird's mouth was wide open, yet it could not make any sound. Several dozens of thick iron chains stretched out of its mouth, each several hundred miles long and taut, and were being pulled by a group of burly longbow men in the distance. Several thousand longbow men were roaring and yelling the battle cry of a golden-armored general, while pulling the iron chains with all their strength. The long iron chains were stretched so tight that they produced creaking noises. Occasionally, they would bump into each other and send up large amounts of fire sparks. Every single longbow man had the strength to carry a mountain, but even with the combined strength of several thousand longbow men, they were still dragged by the gigantic bird, sliding step by step towards Wu Qi. Obviously, these longbow men were not a match for the gigantic bird. Even with the combined strength of several thousand of them, they were still weaker than the gigantic bird. Wu Qi was struck dumb. The gigantic bird flying over his head had a wingspan of over 10 miles, and its entire body was covered with long, pale green feathers that looked almost colorless. Strong gusts of wind wheeled swiftly around the gigantic bird, shrouding it in a thick layer of wind. The feathers of the gigantic bird were fluttering along with the strong wind, especially the 3/10 of miles long feathers on its tail, which were sparkling with a dazzling green light. Every time the feathers moved, tens of hundreds of miles tall whirlwinds would silently rise from the ground. The gigantic bird was so huge, and the wind was so violent. But when the gigantic bird was flying and the strong wind was blowing, not even the slightest sound could be heard. The bird, The wind seemed to be a part of the atmosphere. It and the strong wind it caused had completely merged with the sky and the atmosphere. Therefore, when it was flying and the strong wind rolled, not even the slightest sound could be heard. Every time the gigantic bird flapped its wings, it would emit an indescribably beautiful aura that faintly matched the nature and the universe. It made Wu Qi's heart twitch, as if he had peeped into a trace of the secret of the world. This was the legendary divine bird, the gale. According to the legends, this kind of bird spent its entire life flying in the sky, and would never land on the ground unless it was dead. They flew proudly in the sky millions of miles above the ground, hunting flood dragons flying in the sky as their food. The supreme experts of the gale could even hunt and kill heavenly dragons, and even feed on true dragons. Obviously, the gale flying over Wu Qi's head was just a rookie who had just reached adulthood. Its overall strength was only equal to an ordinary heaven immortal, and it was struggling by relying on the innate divine ability of controlling the wind, as well as the innate divine strength of the Gale clan. If it were an experienced adult Gale, it would have the power to wipe out several thousand longbow men in an instant. Only a rookie who had just reached adulthood would be tempted by the aroma of roasted flood dragons and great pythons placed on the surface of the ocean, and would excitedly soar down from the safe sky millions of miles above the ground, devour several dozens of roasted flood dragons and great pythons in one gulp, and have their throats hooked by special iron hooks, plunging them into such an embarrassing situation. However, according to the arrangement Wu Qi saw when he came here, these iron chains were nailed to the reef with iron stakes. But now, they had turned into a gale, dragging several thousand longbow men in a desperate struggle. Apparently, the gale had been struggling for a long time, and the iron stakes had been broken by it. While Wu Qi was absent-mindedly sizing up the gale which contained an endless power, Feng Qingwu's hoarse and furious roar was suddenly heard coming from behind. "Daoist, stop this beast, and I'll reward you handsomely. As long as you cooperate with us and capture this gale alive, Prefecture Overseer will definitely reward you with endless benefits." Wu Qi turned to look over his shoulder, and saw Feng Qingwu riding a Pegasus in a sorry state, leading nearly 1,000 cavalrymen and running wildly towards him. Her armor was torn and tattered, exposing large patches of snow-white skin in many places, and some had deep wounds that kept oozing out blood. Her left arm hung loosely at her side, and judging from the way it was swaying, it must have been broken at the shoulder. The cavalrymen behind Feng Qingwu were in an even worse state. Many of them were missing noses and eyes, and their bodies were covered in blood. They looked as miserable as one could imagine. At first glance, this group of cavalrymen was exactly what Wu Qi described as a defeated army. Perhaps it was because Wu Qi did not follow Feng Qingwu's order to stop the gale immediately. Feng Qingwu's face twisted ferociously as she cried out, "You bastard! Do you want to die, you Taoist? Quickly stop the gale, or else I'll cut you into 1,000 pieces and wipe out your entire sect." This line again? Wu Qi shook his head. Who exactly was the one who had spoiled this woman to be so arrogant? However, Wu Qi was too lazy to argue with this woman. He rode a cloud and flew several hundred feet up into the sky, then threw out a lower-grade magical flying sword lazily. A 3-foot-long sword beam that was neither white nor grayish flew out in a crooked manner towards the gale's buttocks. But, when the sword beam was still 3 to 5 miles away from the gale, it was blown away by a strong gust of wind. Amidst the strong gust, countless wind blades twisted and turned the flying sword Wu Qi threw out into a dozen pieces of scrap metal, falling to the ground. Biting his own lip, Wu Qi cried out, What a powerful bird!" Then, he opened his mouth and coughed out a mouthful of blood. Wu Qi retracted the cloud and fell to the ground, trembling and unable to get up for a long time. All Wu Qi wanted to do was to put on an act and fool Feng Qingwu. He did not want to be involved in this mess. He did not have any friendship with the Gale, and he had a grudge with Feng Qingwu. So, he just wanted to stay out of it. Therefore, he fell to the ground, crying and wailing, holding his buttocks and twisting his body like a wounded caterpillar. Feng Qingwu rode up to him. Staring fixedly at the Gale, she did not even look at Wu Qi as she scolded in a low voice, "Useless trash." With a loud shout, Feng Qingwu pulled out a javelin from a leather quiver hanging next to the saddle, then casually threw it towards Wu Qi's chest. Wu Qi was struck dumb. Why did this woman want to kill him? At least, he had shot out a flying sword just now, which had helped her a little in terms of face. But how could she kill him just like that? Frowning, Wu Qi twisted his body and slid over 10 feet away like a swimming fish, dodging the javelin just in time. The javelin, which was made of metal, was heavily shot down and was inserted into the solid rock ground more than a foot deep. Feng Qingwu turned to look at Wu Qi with a surprised expression, then said with a cold grin, "You do have some abilities. But how dare you dodge my attack?" Pointing a finger at Wu Qi, Feng Qingwu cried out coldly, "A few of you go and kill this trash. Search his soul and find the location of his sect. After that, kill every single member of his sect." The few cavalrymen brought here by Feng Qingwu answered, then rode towards Wu Qi. They pulled out their heavy battle axes and swords and swung them down forcefully towards Wu Qi. Shrill whistles of wind breaking echoed out as a dozen of axes and swords thrust whistling through the air, shooting straight towards Wu Qi's vital parts. Wu Qi flew into a rage and snapped, "Crazy woman, is your brain filled with water? Lao Tzu was helping you to kill this bird just now." With a teleportation, Wu Qi evaded the few cavalrymen's attack, then came next to Feng Qingwu with a flash. Flipping his hand, he threw out a thunderbolt towards her face. Shocked, Feng Qingwu spun around and cursed, "Are you pretending, you filthy Taoist?" Right at this moment, Gale's body suddenly froze in midair, then 3 long feathers behind its tail swung out and smashed down viciously towards Feng Qingwu. 3 black gusts of wind, each one 100 miles long, came crashing down soundlessly with a suffocating pressure. As Wu Qi was right next to Feng Qingwu, he was enveloped by the gusts as well. Chapter 459. When the chain was broken, the gale swallowed a few times happily, then swallowed the iron hook in its mouth, along with a section of the chain. Drops of blood trickled out from the corner of its mouth. Its mouth and throat were cut by the iron hook, and now that it had swallowed the hook, the wound was exposed and the blood was oozing out. The gale gave Wu Qi a deep look, then threw its head back and let out a joyful cry. After that, it flapped its wings and produced a strong gust of wind. Within an area of 1,000 miles in circumference, a whirlwind of black dragons emerged from the ground and shot straight up into the sky. The bodies of nearly 1,000 men disintegrated in midair, and everything in their bodies turned into wind and air. As the tail feathers of the gale shook slightly, the air sprayed in all directions. Their bodies, their armors and robes, their weapons and ornaments, everything was eroded by the strong wind, turning into invisible gusts that swirled wildly in the sky. The Tigerfang spear was 16 feet long, as thick as a bowl, and its tiger-shaped spearhead was 3 feet and 6 inches long. It brought up a strong gust of wind, roaring like a ferocious tiger as it pierced through the air with a large sheet of golden gleam. When the tip of the spear was still 70 to 80 feet away from Wu Qi, the spear intent had already ripped Wu Qi's Taoist robe, exposing a large patch of skin and flesh. The black dragon's eyes lit up slightly. He gave Wu Qi a glance, then the corner of his huge mouth curved up into a bizarre smile. 9 tinkling noises rang out, followed by a deep, muffled ring of a bronze bell. A dark cloud drifted over from the north in a seemingly slow and light manner. On top of the cloud was a heaven dragon, about 8 miles long, with the cultivation base of a 28th tier heaven immortal. Between the 2 dragon horns on the head of the black dragon was a heavy, ancient-looking, square-shaped hall built with huge black stones. 18 black stone pillars were erected at the entrance of the hall. The tops of these pillars were sunken and filled with kerosene, and the pale green flame rose several tens of feet high, casting a dark green hue on the black dragon's body. The strong wind stirred up by the 3 tail feathers of the gale dissipated, and Feng Qingwu, who was suppressed by the gale and could not move, rose to her feet with a pale face, then dropped to her knees and kowtowed respectfully to the north. One after another, the longbow men who were yelling and pulling the iron chains dropped to their knees, respectfully touching their foreheads to the ground. Wu Qi threw his head back and laughed, "Go, go, don't stay on the ground. A divine beast like you should soar above the ninth heaven. Why do you have to be so greedy? Go back and let your old man spank your butt. Quickly run away. Wu Qi used the wind to fly lightly in the air and was about to escape on his sword light. He laughed wildly at Feng Qingwu, who was struggling bitterly in the storm, and said, "Woman, don't think that everyone under the heaven will do as you please. Who do you really think you are?" At this moment, Feng Qingwu had transformed from an awe-inspiring general into a pug that wagged its tail and begged for its master's love. Wu Qi glanced at the black dragon. This big fellow could tell that Wu Qi had cultivated the dragon transformation script. Any living beings who possessed the bloodline of dragons and cultivated the dragon transformation script would emanate an aura that only pure-blooded dragons could sense. Wu Qi did not deliberately restrain the aura, and that was why the black dragon had discovered the secret of Wu Qi's body. What kind of frightening power was this? Wu Qi's eyes shone brightly, and a dense fiend energy burst out from all over his body, transforming into a dark wall that shielded him within. Strong dark green winds kept blowing soundlessly around him, silently but determinedly attacking the inferno hell wind unleashed by Wu Qi. However, the fiend energy contained a more brutal, corrosive and devouring power than the wind. The wind was gradually melted away, while the fiend energy began to struggle after devouring the wind. "Young master, why did you come here in person?" Feng Qingwu's voice had turned sweet, as if there was a piece of royal jelly in her throat. The sweetness gave Wu Qi goosebumps, and the flattering and servile tone in her voice was full of flattery, and servility. Wu Qi had a feeling that she only lacked a tail. As long as she had a tail, she would definitely try her best to wave it like a fan. Feng Qingwu's body was trembling slightly. She raised her head and gave Wu Qi a flattering smile. At that moment, Wu Qi even thought he was hallucinating. He had met Feng Qingwu twice, and both times, she was so arrogant, cold, and insufferably arrogant. How could she have such a flattering smile on her face? Shivering, Feng Qingwu pressed her forehead against the ground and said with a stammering voice, It's almost done." But this puffy-haired Taoist interrupted. He cut the chain and let Galewind escape. 3 of Galewind's tail feathers smashed down, and Feng Qingwu's face turned pale instantly. With great difficulty, Feng Qingwu raised her head, and when she saw that Wu Qi could actually remain unscathed after being struck by Galewind, and was not killed by it, she could not help but cry out in joy, "That puffy-haired Taoist! Quickly capture this Galewind, and I'll reward you handsomely. Gold, silver, jewelry, beautiful girls. As long as you want it, there's nothing I can't give you." Those longbow people were trembling, and none of them dared to raise their heads. The young man turned his head slightly and stared coldly at Wu Qi. He gave Wu Qi a once-over, then suddenly laughed mockingly and said, "Feng Qingwu, are you trying to shirk your responsibility? How could a mere peak-stage nascent soul cultivator break the dragon fishing hook, which is forged with 10 types of wicked metals and quenched with dragon blood? How could a little Taoist like him own an immortal item? How could he control an immortal item? Do you think I'm an idiot?" 3 drumbeats later, a total of 360 huge bone talismans, each measuring 1,000 feet in length and 80 feet in width and pieced together using some unknown white bone armor, rose from all directions. Blinding grayish-white light blanketed the void, and the air around Wu Qi froze abruptly, while all teleportation spells were broken. The celestial scarlet fiend escape art Wu Qi had just exercised was broken, and the inferno hell fiend energy condensed in his body was thrown into a state of chaos. The turbulent inferno energy exploded inside his body and brought a severe pain to Wu Qi's meridians. A light clang rang out. Amidst the nearly 100 golden-armored men standing on the back of the black dragon, a burly man holding a tiger fang spear flashed and came before Wu Qi. He spun the spear and thrust it straight towards the root of Wu Qi's thigh. A clear cry rang out. Borrowing the tremendous force, the gale soared into the sky. Like a bolt of lightning, its huge body smashed through layers of clouds in just a blink of an eye, then disappeared into the sky with ease. The young master sized up Wu Qi for a while, then sneered and said, "Using teleportation spells with a cultivation base of nascent soul realm? That is possible. Fellow Taoist, may I ask, who is your master, and which primordial immortal is your disciple?" Wu Qi was taken aback, but with a twist of his body he fled to one side. With a blink of his body, Wu Qi had fled tens of miles away, barely avoiding the direct impact of the gale's tail feathers. Wrapped in a strong dark green wind, the tail feathers landed lightly on the ground, enveloping Feng Qingwu and the several hundred knights around her. Abruptly, Wu Qi felt his body lightened, as several dozens of whirlwinds burst out from beneath his feet, rolling him up into the sky. When the black dragon was about 2 to 3 miles away from Wu Qi, he stopped and landed heavily on the ground. For dragon claws were gripping a lofty mountain, while his body was coiled up on top of it. He raised his head high, and a young man slowly walked out from the palace above him. He was clad in a golden robe, fully embroidered with patterns of qilin with purple and silver threads. He was not wearing any armor, but a helmet shaped like a wolf's head. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi was about to fabricate an origin for himself. Suddenly, the young master tilted his head sideways and moved his lips, vaguely forming the word, "capture." But obviously, the black dragon had no intention of reminding the young master. He opened his mouth wide, yawned, and closed his eyes. Standing on the dragon's head, the golden-robed young man gave the long-bow man kneeling on the ground a cold glance, then gave a fierce glare at the broken iron chain. A cold sneer was squeezed out of the young man's mouth as he asked coldly, "Where is the gale? Feng Qingwu, where is the gale you promised?" The gale was terrifyingly powerful, and it contained a power of law that pointed straight to the source of wind. Wu Qi's body spun rapidly along with the gale. A gale kept invading his body, trying to turn him into a wisp of wind, a wisp of air. Black fiendish gleams burst out from his body. Just as Wu Qi was about to flee using the celestial scarlet fiend escape art, found in the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture, a deep, muffled drumming was heard coming from all directions. The first drumming shook the mountains and rivers, and the raging black tornado suddenly dissipated. The second drumming shook the earth, and the surrounding mountain ridges suddenly trembled, while countless rocks slid down from the mountaintops. The third drumming shook one's heart. Wu Qi's heart gave a violent jerk, and all the blood in his body rushed to the top of his head. A huge amount of blood gathered on his face, turning it red, and the blood vessels on his face burst, revealing large patches of blood-red spots. Wu Qi flew up into the sky together with the gale, flying straight towards the gale. Underneath each bone talisman was an old man, clad in a black sackcloth, barefoot, with a hemp belt tied around his waist, and wearing a tall jade crown on his head, sitting cross-legged in midair. An immense spirit light was radiating from their bodies, and their bodies were covered with a layer of white light about the thickness of a thumb. The dazzling white light kept flashing, covering their bodies like a layer of glaze that emitted a strong light. It gave one a strange illusion that they had been separated from this world, and were no longer bound by some rules of this world. Wu Qi did not pay any attention to Feng Qingwu. This woman was too full of herself, and the arrogance and conceit that went deep into her bones was really disgusting. He pulled out the sword of Greedy Wolf and lightly swiped it over the gale's mouth. Then he swung the sword and cut off the several dozens of iron chains hooked onto the gale's mouth. Then, Wu Qi kicked the side of the gale's mouth, then continued to fly backward at top speed. Wu Qi did not say a word. He was quickly digesting and analyzing the information told by this young man. Those disciples of primordial immortals could also use the divine ability of teleportation with a cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm. Judging from this, the divine abilities and cultivation techniques cultivated by these disciples of primordial immortals were much stronger than ordinary cultivators. After all, they were the disciples of primordial immortals. With great effort, he turned his head and looked over at Feng Qingwu and her company. A fist-sized, pale golden beast skeleton with 2 horns was hovering above her head. 7 beams of golden light were shooting out from its 7 apertures, blocking off the attack of the surrounding wind, firmly protecting Feng Qingwu in a narrow space with a diameter of less than 10 feet. The nearly 1,000 knights brought here by Feng Qingwu did not have such a powerful treasure to protect themselves. Just like Wu Qi, their bodies flew up lightly into the sky, and in just a blink of an eye, the wind invaded their bodies and turned them into wisps of wind. Feng Qingwu's body began to tremble violently, and Wu Qi could even hear the sound of bone cracking coming from her body. Feng Qingwu cried out hoarsely, "Young master, you are wise." Although this puffy-haired Taoist has a cultivation base of peak-stage nascent soul realm, he can actually teleport. His overall strength is comparable to a heaven immortal. Chapter 460. As the tiger-headed spear approached, Wu Qi twisted his body, still trying to teleport away. He didn't want to fight with the golden-armored man. However, the surrounding air suddenly trembled, and the magic power he gathered was shattered. Wu Qi's body swayed, and he nearly suffered an internal injury from the backlash of the subspace. The 360 huge bone talismans in the surroundings shone with a dazzling white light, intertwining with each other and locking down the entire void within a radius of 100 miles. With Wu Qi's current cultivation base, it was impossible for him to shatter the seal of the bone talismans. Not good. This is going to be fun. A cold gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes as he pulled out the flaming magpie sword, gripped the hilt with a backhand grip, and slashed at the Tiger Fang spear. The golden-armored man didn't use any divine abilities or spells, but only the divine power of his fleshly body. Wu Qi wanted to see what abilities this man had, so he simply circulated the divine power of his fleshly body to meet the spear head-on. A loud clang rang out. Wu Qi's wrist shook violently, and his fingers could no longer hold the flaming magpie sword. The immortal sword was knocked several thousand feet away, leaving a red trail of light in the air. However, the immortal sword had its own spirit. When Wu Qi loosened his grip, the sword was knocked away. After flying several thousand feet away, it automatically transformed into a stream of flame and shot back into Wu Qi's palm. Wu Qi's body was thrown backward by a tremendous force like a leaf blown by a violent gust of wind. He lost his footing and was knocked back tens of miles in a row. Only then did he barely manage to perform an incantation gesture to stabilize his body. His fingers were cramping, and bursts of pain and numbness came from his fingertips to his wrist. The strike just now had nearly shattered all of Wu Qi's finger bones and meridians. If it were not for the innate yin energy of yin and yang that was constantly nourishing his fleshly body, allowing Wu Qi's body to possess the softness and tenacity of the innate yin energy, Wu Qi's entire palm would have been shattered by the force before he absorbed the innate yin energy of yin and yang. That man's strength was strong, very strong. His physical strength was at least 10 times that of Wu Qi's. Now that Wu Qi had broken through the realm of 35 transformations of Heavenly Dragon, with just his fleshly body alone, it was comparable to the power of a 35th tier heaven immortal casting a powerful divine ability with his strongest energy. The man's pure fleshly strength was 10 times stronger than Wu Qi's. In other words, his strength was comparable to a peak 32nd tier heaven immortal. His body did not have the slightest trace of magic power aura or spiritual chi fluctuation. He had relied purely on his physical strength to achieve such a terrifying strength. What a freak! Wu Qi rubbed his right hand and forced out a smile. Holding the Tiger Fang spear in his hand, the burly man bent his legs slightly, stared coldly at Wu Qi, and said with a cold grin, "Not bad. You can withstand 10% of my attack. Among those weak cultivators, you are an anomaly." Taking a deep breath, the burly man said coldly, "The cultivation of fleshly body cultivation is widely spread among cultivators. But how can you, the immortal cultivators, endure the pain of tempering your fleshly body? In all the heavenly realms, only 1 out of every 100,000 cultivators practice the cultivation of fleshly body cultivation, and not even 1 out of every 10 million cultivators could achieve some results in it. You are amazing." Wu Qi gave the burly man a thumbs up and said, "You are amazing as well. You can cultivate such a powerful strength with the body of a human. That's very amazing." The burly man shook his head mockingly and said coolly, "Do you think you're praising me? Instead, I think you're humiliating me. Don't look down on us mortals. The supreme experts of the human race are strong enough to fight against primordial immortals. I'm 35 years old this year, and I only have this little cultivation base. So, what does that mean to me? Wu Qi's scalp went numb. This burly man was only 35 years old? How could he possess such a frightening strength just by tempering his fleshly body? How was he any different from a monster? Cultivators breathed in and out the natural energy, studied the mysteries of heaven and earth, tempered their nascent divinity and soul, worked hard for 1,000 years, and finally became heaven immortals. After that, it would take 100,000 years of hard work for each tier they advanced. Only then could they possess the miraculous power of toppling mountains and overturning seas. A 35-year-old human could possess such a frightening strength with just his fleshly body alone. He was definitely a monster. Judging from his words, it seemed he was not satisfied with his own cultivation base. In other words, there were people among the human race who were younger than him, but stronger than him. Otherwise, why would he say that Wu Qi's praise was a humiliation to him? Wu Qi gasped and murmured to himself, "You're only 35 years old?" Standing on the dragon's head, the golden-robed young man cried out coldly, "Storm, why are you wasting time with that Taoist? Just break his limbs and capture him alive. He should pay the price for ruining my plan. I'm planning to give this gale to my father as a gift for his 300th birthday." Storm answered. He rubbed his palms together, and the spear began to spin rapidly in his palms. The tip of the spear glowed with a round golden light, and a large number of sharp wind blades emerged. Storm gave a loud laugh and began to run. He circled around Wu Qi and turned into hundreds of afterimages, surrounding Wu Qi and forming a wall made of human shadows. Amidst the shrill whistling of the air, Storm suddenly thrust his spear toward Wu Qi over 1,000 times in a row. The shadows of the spear were dazzling, and the wind created by the spear was deafening. The entire sky was filled with afterimages of the spearheads, which were coming at Wu Qi from all directions. Wu Qi felt a chill run down his spine. He exercised the mystic eyes of universe with all his strength, and the countless afterimages of the spear gradually revealed their true forms. Only 1,080 cold beams remained in their original form, piercing towards Wu Qi's limbs from all directions. With a shake of his wrist, the earth element dragon scale shield issued a deep, muffled cry. 1,080 golden dragon scales shot whistling out and blocked the cold beams. A loud clang rang out. The golden dragon scales were knocked away, but the afterimages of Storm's spear disappeared at the same time. Storm cried out in surprise. All of a sudden, a rapid swishing noise was heard. He was surprised that Wu Qi could actually see through his secret spear technique. Without any hesitation, he thrust his spear straight towards Wu Qi's heart. The golden-robed young man laughed. Shaking his head, he said, "Storm, you're a rough fellow. Fine, you're dead now." Before his words could fade away, a white beam of light shot out from the top of Wu Qi's head. Wu Qi gripped the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag tightly and waved it. A shrill whistle towered into the sky. Storm, who was holding the golden spear, felt his body go limp and fell to his knees weakly. His 3 spiritual souls and 7 physical souls gushed out from his 7 apertures, then were absorbed into the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag. With a backhand grip, Wu Qi smashed the flag forcefully, shattering Storm's head and causing his spiritual ocean to fall heavily to the ground. When Storm's body was shattered, it was not the usual sound of bones breaking and flesh breaking, but a crystal cracking sound. This man's body had been tempered to an unimaginable degree. Red blood sprayed out from Storm's body. Looking at Storm's blood that reeked of blood, Wu Qi's first reaction was, "It's a pity that I didn't bring Gold Horn and Silver Horn with me." Otherwise, with such an enormous life force contained in Storm's body, their overall strength could be improved tremendously. Storm's fleshly body was ridiculously strong, but his soul was only slightly stronger than that of an ordinary mortal. Before he could take into account the fact that Wu Qi possessed the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, an extraordinary treasure that specialized in attacking souls and nascent divinity, A mighty warrior like him was killed by Wu Qi with just one strike. Blood suddenly returned to Feng Qingwu's face. She gave Storm's dead body a deep look, and a faint smile emerged on her face. Storm's tragic death proved that Wu Qi's overall strength was very strong, and the stronger Wu Qi was, the lesser her responsibility would be. If Wu Qi could kill a few more captains who were as strong as Storm, Feng Qingwu's responsibility would be close to zero. Seeing that Storm was killed by Wu Qi with just one strike, the golden-robed young man's body trembled slightly, and he bellowed furiously, "Kill him!" 12 golden-armored men rushed out from the dragon's back at the same time. They fished out palm-sized bone talismans from their waists and were about to crush them to release the restrictive spells in them to protect their souls. But how could Wu Qi allow them to activate the bone talismans? With a heavy swing of the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, Wu Qi bit the tip of his tongue and sprayed a mouthful of blood onto it. A shrill ghost howl towered into the sky, and a large sheet of dark clouds rushed out of the flag, spreading across tens of miles in just a blink of an eye. Before the 12 golden-armored men could activate the bone talismans, their bodies turned stiff at the same time. Their souls were sucked into the flag, and their bodies fell heavily to the ground. The flaming magpie sword thrust out whistling through the air, slicing them into 24 pieces. When the flaming magpie sword tore through their bodies, a crisp sound of metal clashing could be heard. The fleshly bodies of these 12 golden-armored men were so strong that they did not seem to be human. Another 12 experts had fallen. Feng Qingwu's complexion had completely returned to normal, and she even breathed out a sigh of relief. On the other hand, the golden-robed young man's face turned livid. He opened his mouth and felt a strong taste of blood in his throat. He nearly coughed out a mouthful of blood. He shouted hoarsely, "My 72 generals of the minor all heaven. Attack together and tear him into 1,000 pieces. What are you waiting for?" The golden-robed young man roared at the other 59 golden-armored men on the dragon's back, but the last sentence was directed at the black-robed old men sitting cross-legged under the huge bone talismans. Only then did those old men react. They raised their right hands at the same time and recited an incantation. Abruptly, 360 huge bone talismans shone with a bright light. The bodies of the 59 golden-armored men were immediately covered with a layer of grayish-white spirit light, which protected them like a layer of armor. Wu Qi desperately waved the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag with all his strength. But shrill ghost howls kept ringing out, and a large number of longbow men were knocked off their feet, while the 59 golden-armored men remained motionless. 3 golden-armored men glided and came before Wu Qi, thrusting 2 spears and 1 blade at the same time towards Wu Qi's vital parts. 1 spear pierced his heart, 1 pierced his throat, and the last hacked forcefully at Wu Qi's neck. A murderous aura that seemed to be able to behead someone with a single slash came assaulting Wu Qi's face. Wu Qi was greatly shocked. He activated the Earth Element Dragon Scale shield with all his might, sending 36,000 golden dragon scales flying out from Chi-Chi and wheeling around his body. Loud metal clangs could be heard without an end. 59 strong men in golden armors moved in a strange pattern, forming a magic formation that seemed to be ceaselessly striking like a flood. Heavy strikes landed on the golden dragon scale light over and over again. Wu Qi's energy and blood were trembling violently, and his body, together with the golden dragon scales, kept bouncing back and forth in the air like a rubber ball. After several hundred strikes, the Earth Element Dragon Scale shield nearly disintegrated. Wu Qi gave a muffled snort, and blood was seen trickling out of his 7 apertures. He had suffered some internal injuries. The flaming magpie kept hacking and hacking at the golden-armored men, but the golden armor worn by these men was extremely tough and flexible. No matter how the immortal sword hacked and hacked, it only brought up a large number of sparks. Although the immortal sword managed to break the armor, it did not have enough strength to tear the bodies of these men. In just the time to finish a pot of tea, Wu Qi had suffered a serious internal injury, while the golden-armored men only had some cuts on their skin. Suddenly, Wu Qi coughed out mouthfuls of blood, as his internal organs were cracked. The Earth Element Dragon Scale shield let out a shrill cry. The continuous heavy blows had made it impossible for the shield to withstand any longer. A crisp ringing noise echoed out, as large pieces of golden dragon scales were knocked flying away. Abruptly, Wu Qi's body was exposed in front of everyone. A spear thrust over like a venomous snake, piercing through Wu Qi's right shoulder from the back. Chapter 461. Haha. A burly man was holding a spear in his hand, with the tip of the spear pointing at Wu Qi, whose shoulder was pierced through. Then, he thrust his heavy axe out from the side, shimmering with a bronze gleam as it hacked viciously towards Wu Qi's neck. The burly man holding the spear cried out, "Brothers, put more strength into your attack. This kid has also cultivated a body cultivation technique, and his fleshly body is extraordinarily tough." Even without the burly man's reminder, the other 72 generals of Minor All Heaven had already judged from the friction produced when the spear tip pierced through Wu Qi's shoulder that Wu Qi's fleshly body was at least 100 times tougher than ordinary cultivators. The golden-armored burly man clenched his teeth and his eyes bulged as he swung the axe down with all his might. "No matter how tough your body is, it can never withstand Lao Tzu's mountain-splitting axe," he said with a fierce laugh. The severe pain made Wu Qi's body twitch, and his eyes turned scarlet. A long, almost crazy howl came out of Wu Qi's mouth. Staring at the heavy axe that was about to touch his neck, Wu Qi cried out fiercely, "Damn it! It hurts!" With a twist of his body, Wu Qi suddenly transformed into a clump of dark mist and spread out in all directions. Among all the mystic techniques from the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture, the Celestial Scarlet Fiend escaping art, the mist escaping art, and Wu Qi's body had transformed into a hazy mist. A strong wind blew across, pushing the dark mist to a distance of 1 mile. Then, the mist suddenly condensed inwards, and Wu Qi's body reappeared. The cultivation techniques of the fiend path were cruel, ruthless, bizarre, and unpredictable, and had all sorts of miraculous effects that were unbelievable to outsiders. Wu Qi had transformed into a mist and fled. When his body reformed, the wound on his right shoulder had completely healed. Apart from his slightly pale face, Wu Qi looked as if nothing had happened. Only Wu Qi himself knew that turning into mist and fleeing, then reforming his body and using a secret demonic path technique to reforge his body and heal his wounds seemed easy. But in truth, in that short instant, he had already consumed 30% of his blood essence. Wu Qi's vision was blacking out, and he felt his strength was drained. With a thought in his mind, the black dragon spirit ring spat out 3 blood crystals and a large amount of drunken dragon incense powder. With the blood crystals sticking to his skin, Wu Qi continued to absorb the blood essence and yuan qi from the blood crystal. At the same time, an intense devil flame burst out from his body. The black devil flame was emanating an eerie, cold air, and a pungent odor that made those generals of Minor All Heaven frown. A bald man in golden armor sneered and said, "What kind of demonic technique is this kid cultivating? Your whole body reeks of rotten flesh. Why does it feel like you're in an unmarked graveyard?" Wu Qi's entire body was shrouded in the devil flame, with dark devil aura rolling around him. Only a pair of blood-red eyes could be seen glinting brightly. Through the dark flame and mist, his eyes were the only thing that could be seen clearly. The Inferno Hell Fiend scripture was fully activated. Because of the influence of the devil technique, Wu Qi's voice became sharp and unpleasant like a sandpaper, unmarked graveyard? Today, this place is indeed going to become an unmarked graveyard. Laughing strangely, Wu Qi suddenly pointed his finger at the golden-robed youth and cried out, "I don't kill nameless people. Tell me your name." The golden-robed youth stared at Wu Qi in astonishment. After a while, he smiled and said, "Don't kill nameless people? Could it be that you think you can kill me?" After a brief moment of pondering, the golden-robed youth said in a reserved manner, "Fine, I'll let you die knowing that I'm Feng Jupin, the prefecture overseer of Pang Province. The current human emperor has conferred me the title of Marquis Pang." Upon hearing the golden-robed youth's introduction, all the generals of Minor All Heaven stopped attacking. They surrounded Wu Qi, bowed their heads respectfully, and listened attentively to Feng Jupen's words. Feng Jupen stuck out his chest and said coolly, "My father is Feng Lingling, the prefecture overseer of Diyu province. He is in charge of all the affairs in the 900 provinces around Zhong province, and has the power to decide the life and death of all the billions of living beings in the 900 provinces." A cold gleam flashed in Wu Qi's eyes. Yu Hehuan had mentioned the official system of Diyu dynasty in his confession. Of course, as a prodigal son who had never been to Pangu continent, he did not know much, but it was enough for Wu Qi to learn some of the secrets. The Diyu dynasty divided the provinces under the heaven into 9 grades. The size of each province was the same, but according to the variety of products, population, tax revenue, and other objective conditions, the prefecture overseer was also divided into 9 grades from the 9th grade provinces to the 1st grade provinces. The 1st grade prefecture overseer had the power to promote, demote, and even exterminate the officials in the 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and even 9th grade provinces. Pang province was just a 7th grade province, while Zhong province was the only 1st grade province among the 900 provinces nearby. Feng Lingling, the prefecture overseer of Zhong province, was, in fact, the king of the vast territory formed by the 900 provinces. Feng Jupen could not help but sneer when he saw Wu Qi gasp. "Are you afraid now? Are you regretting it? Now you know that you should not meddle in my affairs." "Hee, it took me a lot of effort to lure a Gale here, and I was about to present it to my father as a birthday gift, but you actually let it go. Taoist, you deserve to die. You deserve to be cut into 1,000 pieces." Feng Jupen stretched out a finger and gently slit his neck, then said coldly, "After I kill you, I'll capture your soul and hand it over to the great oracles of the Directorate of Celestials for interrogation. I want to find out where your sect is, and then—" He dragged his voice and gave a strange smile, then continued in a low voice, "After that, all the men in your sect will be tortured to death, and all the women after I've enjoyed them. The most miserable fate in the world will be waiting for them." While Feng Jupen was about to proudly tell them what kind of cruel methods he was going to use to torture the people of Wu Qi's sect, all 59 generals of Minor All Heaven suddenly fell to the ground one after another. Their faces were slightly red, as if they were drunk. Feng Jupen was struck dumb. He stared blankly at his trusted subordinates and cried out hoarsely, "What's wrong? What the hell are you doing? What are you doing?" The black dragon beneath Feng Jupen grinned, then closed his huge nostrils in an inconspicuous manner, firmly blocking the air passage. The black dragon narrowed his eyes, and a faint smile lingered on the corner of his mouth. Drunken dragon incense, it must be this vicious thing. The members of the dragons hated drunken dragon incense very much, so they knew all its characteristics like the back of their hands. Judging by the number of people who had fainted, it must be the effect of drunken dragon incense. Of course, when faced with a cultivator who practiced the orthodox dragon transformation script and possessed drunken dragon incense, the black dragon was too lazy to give Feng Jupen any advice. He stuck out his tongue and licked the corner of his mouth, then narrowed his eyes and gave Wu Qi a meaningful look. "I'm just working for money. Don't come to me when you're going to kill someone later." Wu Qi understood the meaning revealed by the black dragon's eyes and brows, and he nearly fell to the ground. Working for money? Is that what he means? He clicked his tongue and sighed with emotion. Wu Qi completely absorbed the enormous blood essence and energy contained in the 3 blood crystals on his chest, completely replenishing the blood essence and energy he had consumed when casting the mist evasion art just now. The flaming magpie swung out with a shrill cry, transforming into a gigantic crimson bird that streaked across the sky. The immortal sword swept across the necks of the generals of Minor All Heaven, chopping off their heads. These generals of Minor All Heaven had very strong fleshly bodies, and their blood was extremely abundant. Their heads were chopped off, and their strong hearts pumped the blood. Blood sprayed out from their necks like water sprayed out from a high-pressure faucet, shooting to a distance of several hundred feet away. The blood of these people was extremely abundant, and the blood flowing out from their necks was like a never-ending stream. The volume of blood in their bodies was at least 10 times greater than that of ordinary people. Blood sprayed all over the ground. Wu Qi let out a few strange laughs, then suddenly transformed into a clump of dark mist and fled into the distance at top speed. Just now, he used the fiend flame to burn the drunken dragon incense powder, and in just a few breaths of time, several hundred kilograms of drunken dragon incense had been burned away. The fragrance was masked by the stench of rotting corpses. Unknowingly, the generals of Minor All Heaven had inhaled a great amount of drunken dragon incense and had fallen to the ground. Drunken dragon incense had a direct effect on a cultivator's soul and nascent divinity. Therefore, when a cultivator's soul was too strong, the incense would lose its effect. Therefore, the strongest drunken dragon incense Wu Qi concocted could only completely anesthetize a 36th tier heaven immortal. As for those heaven immortals above 35th tier, it could only numb their immortal souls and weaken their overall strength. Unfortunately, although the fleshly bodies of the generals of Minor All Heaven were extraordinarily strong, their souls were no different from ordinary people. A small amount of drunken dragon incense was more than enough to knock down any formidable human warrior, let alone when Wu Qi burned several hundred kilograms of drunken dragon incense in one go. Throwing his head back and letting out a wild laugh, Wu Qi suddenly transformed into a dark shadow and sped towards Anhe City. Feng Jupin was waving his arms and legs in exasperation. Pointing at the dumbfounded old men sitting cross-legged under the bone talismans, he cursed in a hoarse voice, "You bunch of useless fools. Are you all fools? Are you fools? You are the oldest oracles in Pang Province's Directorate of Celestials. You are connected to ghosts and deities, and you claim that there is nothing under the heaven that you do not know. Where are your supernatural spells? Where is your infinite magical power? Why can't you even protect my beloved generals?" All the oracles were rendered speechless. When Wu Qi killed Storm and the other 13 generals with the Jade Bone's soul-searching flag, these oracles had instinctively cast spells to defend against soul attacks on the other generals when they rushed out. But they did not expect that Wu Qi could be so despicable as to use the incense to subdue the enemies. Therefore, they did not cast spells to isolate the poisonous gas and miasma on these generals. As a result, Wu Qi's drunken dragon incense had killed all 59 formidable generals in an instant. Feng Jupin was so angry that he almost coughed blood. While the oracles were still in a daze, they raised their right hands at the same time and performed a finger incantation gesture, pointing at the huge bone talisman hovering over their heads. Immediately, dark clouds began to gather in the sky. Thunderbolts rocked and rocked in the dark clouds, illuminating the dark clouds. All of a sudden, thousands of thunderbolts plunged down from the sky and landed on Wu Qi's body almost at the same time. Accompanied by a jarring cicada cry, the green cicada wings transformed into a large sheet of green mist and rushed out, firmly protecting Wu Qi. However, the power of the thunderbolts was unexpectedly strong. With a shrill cry, the green cicada wings exploded into countless beams of green light that scattered in all directions. The thunderbolts smashed brutally on Wu Qi's body, shattering the dark fiend energy that protected him inch by inch. Then, the thunderbolt struck directly on Wu Qi's body. Half of Wu Qi's body was charred and smoking, while the thunderbolts rushed into his body and wreaked havoc inside. Wu Qi howled in pain. Then he let out a long cry and rushed straight towards the 3 bone talismans and the 3 oracles of Feng Province's Directorate of Celestials, who were blocking his way. The 3 old oracles raised their hands and performed an incantation gesture at the same time. With a cold gleam flashing in their eyes, they snapped at Wu Qi, "This road is blocked. Get the hell back." An enormous pressure came pressing down on his face like an iron wall. Wu Qi was shocked. Behind him, dozens of old oracles were approaching with the huge bone talismans. Vaguely, they had formed a complicated and bizarre formation in the sky, and were about to continue attacking Wu Qi with a secret spell. If Wu Qi was slightly hindered by the 3 old oracles, he would most likely die here. He opened his mouth and shot out 5 acquired spirit pearls of 5 elements at the same time. Ignoring the fact that he might damage their source, Wu Qi directly detonated all the energy in them. The enormous power that the spirit pearls of 5 elements had accumulated for countless periods exploded in an instant. A strong 5-colored light flashed, and a mushroom cloud rose from the ground. The 3 old oracles and their bone talismans were instantly vaporized amidst the strong light. The 5 acquired spirit pearls of 5 elements flew back into Wu Qi's body with a dim glow, and could no longer move. Suddenly, a huge amount of blood burst out of Wu Qi's body. Using the blood escape art from Scroll of Stealing and the blood escape art from Inferno Hellfiend scripture, he transformed into a beam of blood light and fled at top speed. But before he could transform into a beam of blood light, a huge shadow of a skeleton smashed heavily onto his body. A muffled snort rang out as Wu Qi fled and vanished without a trace. All that was left on the spot was blood, which instantly turned into a black, sticky, rotten liquid. Chapter 462. The hazy, skeleton-shaped ghost energy was a restrictive spell cast by several dozens of old oracles at the back. As soon as the ghost energy entered his body, an immense evil energy rushed straight into his heart. The cold air made Wu Qi's entire body feel cold, and nearly paralyzed his entire body. Just when Wu Qi could no longer withstand the invasion of the ghostly aura, and his body turned stiff and was about to fall to the ground, a strange warm current rose from all parts of his body, easily dispelling the ghostly aura. The warm current was very familiar, and it suddenly reminded Wu Qi of that strange bookstore, and the old man who was obviously blind, but was reading a book while shaking his head and praising endlessly. It was the spirit tea given by the blind old man. After Wu Qi drank it, the spirit tea dispelled the stagnant aura of death in his body and healed his injuries by 80 to 90%. Today, it was the spirit tea that saved Wu Qi once again. However, Wu Qi could clearly sense that it was the last bit of power left in his body by the spirit tea. After dispelling the ghost energy that nearly froze Wu Qi, the medicinal strength of the spirit tea disappeared completely. I won't be so lucky next time. Wu Qi began to reflect on the gains and losses this time. It was an undeserved disaster. Wu Qi felt that his luck was really bad recently. He was planning to take a detour to avoid Feng Qingwu and her company on his way back, but he did not expect that the gale would bring Feng Qingwu and bump into him, dragging him into this muddy water again. Not to mention Feng Qingwu and the cavalrymen she led, all of them were either killed or wounded by the gale, leaving only Feng Qingwu, who could not pose any threat to Wu Qi. Feng Jupin. Muttering Feng Jupin's name under his breath, Wu Qi clenched his fists tightly and swore in his heart. Although he had killed the 72 generals of Minor All Heaven, and it was Feng Jupin who had suffered a great loss, Wu Qi could not swallow the anger in his heart. The prefecture overseer of Pang Province? Wu Qi clenched his teeth. He had to take revenge for the fact that he was almost killed by them. It's just a matter of timing, Wu Qi thought to himself. Feng Jupin's father, Feng Lingling, was the prefecture overseer of Zhong Province, a high-ranking and powerful feudal official in the Yu dynasty. If he wanted to take revenge on Feng Jupin, he had to find the right time to kill him with a single strike, and not give him any chance to turn the tables. Or else, he would be killed. But Wu Qi also thought that perhaps when he was plotting against Feng Jupin, he could also teach Yu Miao a lesson. Yu Miao of Zhong Province's left minister, Yu Miao. Wu Qi could still remember the palm of Yu Miao. Of Yu of Wu Qi was the palm of a palm. But the Yu body of overseer of Yu of left Yu. Of Wu of Qi spirit immortal Yu. Wu Qi Wu of Qi of spirit of Qi, of stage Wu of. The left hand, Wu added in one of. However, this blood escape art was too damaging to Wu Qi's blood. After flying for 12 hours in a single breath, Wu Qi was now hundreds of thousands of miles away from where he fought just now. Suddenly, he coughed out a mouthful of blood that looked like clear water and slowly stopped. Quickly, Wu Qi took out a dozen blood crystals and stuffed them into his mouth. After swallowing the blood crystals and slowly digesting them, Wu Qi formed hand seals and quickly absorbed the blood essence and Yuan Qi to recover his lost energy. Fortunately, he had so many blood crystals transformed from Heaven Immortal's blood essence with him. If it was an ordinary person, after losing more than 70% of their blood essence, it would take them a long time to slowly recover. Dense blood essence and yuan qi gradually spread out. Drops of fresh blood were produced from his bone marrow. His abundant strength was slowly recovering. Wu Qi took in deep breaths, exhaling. His breath was filled with a dense blood-red color. He stood in a remote valley. Every time he inhaled and exhaled, the air within a radius of a mile would fluctuate and spin, forming a small whirlwind. Just when Wu Qi's blood essence was about to recover to its peak state and he was about to stop his surging blood energy, a Buddhist chant was heard. A pure gold Buddhist staff, as thick as a large bowl, struck straight at Wu Qi's back with a muffled roar of a lion. Wu Qi's body trembled, and several defensive spirit artifacts that he had been nurturing inside his body were activated one after another. Along with various colored flames, they rushed out of his body to protect him. These spirit artifacts were given to him by Patriarch Yuan Hua and the other seniors of the sect when he left Green Cliff Planet, and each of them was a rare and exquisite artifact. But it was clear that the staff was a Buddhist treasure with a quality comparable to an immortal item. A few spirit items were seen rushing and glowing, protecting him. Suddenly, a stream of yellow airflow burst out of the staff, which transformed into a huge dragon head and thrust out from it. The glowing flames of the few spirit artifacts dimmed abruptly, while their item spirits wailed and wailed. A large sheet of bright light exploded, and the staff pierced through all the spirit artifacts and smashed straight into Wu Qi's back. The Earth Element Dragon Scale shield had just been attacked by 59 generals of Minor All Heaven, and its energy had been greatly depleted, while its item spirit had fallen into a coma. When the staff was less than half an inch away from Wu Qi's back, the Earth Element Dragon Scale shield sensed Wu Qi's state of mind suddenly fluctuating violently. Only then did it let out a dragon roar, unleashing a clump of yellow earth energy that wrapped around Wu Qi. The yellow earth energy wrapped around the staff, slowing its forward momentum and neutralizing 60% of its strength. However, the remaining 40% of its strength still smashed into Wu Qi's back. Like a heavy bombardment from a cannon, it caused Wu Qi's back to cave in by 3 inches. Wu Qi was quietly exercising a cultivation technique to absorb the energy essence from the blood crystals, and his blood and energy were surging ceaselessly in his body. Suddenly, he felt a warm sensation in his chest, and his heart nearly burst out from his chest. He opened his mouth and coughed out a large amount of blood, while Wu Qi was knocked flying several hundred feet away like a kite. Wu Qi spun awkwardly in the air, twisting and turning his body, and finally managed to stabilize his body. Wu Qi staggered a few steps back, then turned to look at the man who sneakily attacked him from behind. He was a monk, standing over 13 feet tall, with a muscular body that looked like it was forged from steel, and his skin took on a strange bronze hue, glinting faintly with a metallic luster. Behind the monk's head was a Buddhist halo with a diameter of 3 feet, and between his brows was a mark of a white crescent moon. He had a dignified appearance, and when he moved, he looked like a lion or a tiger. His upper body was bared, and his lower body was wrapped with a python skin. He looked like an eminent monk who could subdue dragons and tigers, a great benefactor who had committed murder and arson. When he saw Wu Qi turning around, the monk held the staff in his left hand and slammed it hard on the ground, then placed his right hand before his chest and greeted Wu Qi. Buddha is merciful, merciful, merciful. Fellow Taoist, you have a tough bone. Since I failed to kill you with this staff, I will have to spend more effort today. Wu Qi clenched his teeth and did not answer. Instead, he touched the spot where he was hit by the monk's staff with a backhand. A few vertebrae on the back of his spine were dislocated, and his spinal cord was pressed down, causing his entire body to feel numb. Clenching his teeth, Wu Qi reached out his fingers and grabbed onto the few deformed vertebrae, pulling them out forcefully. With a loud crack, the vertebrae were aligned again. Wu Qi took a deep breath, and the innate wood element energy that contained an endless life force began to flow rapidly in the injured spot. The injury healed quickly, and the pain gradually faded away. When the injury was almost healed, Wu Qi clenched his teeth and stared at the monk as he said angrily, "Monk, there is no enmity between us. Why did you kill me secretly? The monk chuckled and chanted the name of Buddha, then said with a deep voice, I'm Arhat Bao Xing. Fellow Taoist, do you find my name familiar? I'm the eldest disciple of the three lotus thrones six-armed demon subduing great Bodhisattva, a disciple of the great solar wheel glorious Buddha of the great solar heavenly mirror. Fellow Taoist, since you have bullied my junior brother, naturally, I have to find you and settle the score with you. Off in the distance, a dozen auspicious clouds rose into the sky from the valley, as the furious Arhat Bao Sheng brought 16 burly monks and came flying towards Wu Qi at top speed on a cloud. Even from afar, Arhat Bao Sheng cried out sternly, You've made me suffer a lot. Not only did I not get to eat the lamb, but I've also gotten myself smelly. Arhat Bao Sheng, how can I repay your great kindness if I don't tear you into 1,000 pieces? Casting a sideways glance at Arhat Bao Sheng, Wu Qi turned to Arhat Bao Xing and asked, How did you find me? Don't tell me you've been following me all the way? That's impossible. I think I'm a very careful person, so it's impossible for me to be followed by you without noticing anything. Arhat Bao Sheng had already rushed over on a cloud, raising a Vajra demon subduing sword menacingly as he was about to hack at Wu Qi. However, Wu Qi was too lazy to even give Arhat Bao Sheng a glance. He just stared at Arhat Bao Xing with a smile on his face. Arhat Bao Xing coughed deeply, and Arhat Bao Sheng, who was charging like a mad tiger just now, immediately stopped attacking. Although the tip of the sword was less than 3 feet away from Wu Qi's head, he still put the sword away, put his palms together and bowed to Arhat Bao Xing obediently, then stepped back on a cloud. Together with the other 16 burly monks, Arhat Bao Xing, Arhat Bao Sheng, and the rest of the 18 monks had formed a circle about 100 meters in diameter, tightly trapping Wu Qi inside. Indistinctly, the aura of 18 monks had merged into one, forming an impenetrable wall that firmly trapped Wu Qi inside. When Arhat Bao Xing saw that Wu Qi was trapped in the Vajra heavenly dragon demon subduing ring that was secretly taught by his master, a reserved smile appeared on his face as he slowly fished out a Bodhi leaf the size of a cattail fan from the python's skin wrapped around his waist. The leaf was translucent, as if it was carved out of jade. A ring of golden Buddhist light shrouded its surface, while emanating a strange fragrance that calmed one's mind. This is the Bodhi meditation leaf crafted by my master using the divine ability of the heaven will. If you have any request, I can write something on this leaf with my own blood essence, and the other Bodhi meditation leaf in my master's hand will display it. Similarly, if my master writes something on the other Bodhi meditation leaf in his hand, I will receive the message immediately. Arhat Bao Xing said complacently, My master is a 3 lotus throne 6-armed demon subduing great Bodhisattva, an expert in subduing demons and devils. With just a glance from the infinite Buddha eyes he cultivates, he can see everything in the universe. Wu Qi nodded and said, I see. Which Bodhisattva has discovered my trace? Arhat Bao Xing nodded and said, We've been waiting here for you since 14 hours ago. Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath. 14 hours ago, Wu Qi was fighting desperately with the generals of Minor All Heaven, and he did not know where he would run to, but that Bodhisattva had already predicted that he would come here. Wu Qi smiled wryly. He knew very well that it was because the Bodhisattva's cultivation base and magic power were much higher than his, and that was why he was able to find traces of him in the vast heavenly mystery, and thus predict his future. Unless Wu Qi could form the innate chaotic Dharma body found in the scroll of stealing and completely separate his aura from the heavenly mystery, those almighty experts would be able to clearly grasp his every move. All he needed was the innate yang energy. All he needed was that thread of innate yang energy. Wu Qi took a deep breath, cupped his fist and bowed to Arhat Bao Xing as he said, Monk, what are you trying to do by stopping me? Arhat Bao Xing laughed in a deep voice, then nodded and said, Fellow Taoist, there is a fate between you and the Buddhist League. Please become my master's disciple. Wu Qi was taken aback. Why was there a fate between him and the Buddhist League? However, Arhat Bao Sheng was very straightforward. He cried out sternly, Cut the crap. Hand over all the treasures you robbed from Qing Su Immortal Pass. then obediently join the Buddhist League and become a coolie boy. If you do that, we'll spare your life today. Otherwise, you won't be able to die even if you want to. Wu Qi said angrily, "So what if you want to rob me? Do you think there is a fate between me and the Buddhist League?" Roaring furiously, Wu Qi opened his mouth and spat out the sword of Greedy Wolf. A dark beam shot straight towards Arhat Baosheng. Chapter 463. The heavenly dragon transformed from the staff grabbed onto Wu Qi's head, while dozens of golden scales flew up to meet it. The dragon claw and the golden scales clashed and produced a deafening boom. The golden scales were scattered in all directions, while the dragon claw was knocked flying away by the heavy earth element energy. Immediately after that, a series of rapid strikes rang out. Wu Qi's body trembled as Arhat Baoxian's lotus energy exploded on his back, sending thousands of golden scales flying in all directions. The weapons of the other 16 monks, Chi-Chi, landed on Wu Qi's body and knocked him flying away. "You bunch of damn ball donkeys." Gritting his teeth, Wu Qi was about to draw out the innate energy essence in his innate nascent soul to fight these monks with all his might. Suddenly, a sonorous bird cry was heard coming from above. Immediately after that, a shadow blocked out the sunlight, while a strong gust of wind blew down soundlessly from above. The force of the gust was very strong, so strong that it was hard for anyone to accept it. The 18 arhats who surrounded Wu Qi let out a strange cry as they were rolled up by the dark green gust and slammed heavily onto the mountaintop a few miles away. The other 16 monks cried out the name of Buddha at the same time, raising their Vajra scepters, Vajra rings, Vajra swords, and Bodhi staffs. 16 Buddhist weapons were raised up at the same time, smashing down towards Wu Qi's head with Chi-Chi. These monks had the cultivation base of heaven immortals, and each of them was a golden arhat. With the combination of the indestructible body of the Buddhist League and the divine ability of Vajra, these monks could shatter a mountain to pieces with just a casual strike. Ha! Arhat Baoxian and Arhat Baosheng sat down cross-legged on the ground at the same time, forming a circle around Wu Qi. 3 white lotuses floated out from the top of their heads, and between the lotuses were 1, 2, or 3 relics. Dazzling rays of light were emitted from the relics and the lotuses, transforming into a dense Buddhist light that connected the 18 monks into one. The gale gave a sonorous cry, then swung its 3 long tails and slapped down towards Arhat Baosheng, who had just risen to his feet. Arhat Baosheng let out a miserable howl, as his body was pulled up into the air by the whirlwind, slamming forcefully into another lofty mountain. An ear-splitting sound of bones cracking was heard as Arhat Baosheng's head smashed onto a solid mountain rock, shattering it and turning it into a meat paste. More than a dozen adult grand gales clustered around the baby gale. Strong gusts of wind swirled around them as they flapped their wings. In the blink of an eye, they pierced through the layers of clouds and soared into the sky. With a casual wave of his hand, he called back the sword of Greedy Wolf. Then, Flaming Magpie flew up into the sky amidst a towering flame. A looming crimson bird spread its wings and enveloped Wu Qi. Countless golden scales wheeled quickly around Wu Qi's body, producing ear-splitting whistling noises. Wu Qi retracted the Inferno demonic nascent soul's dense demonic aura and injected all the quintessential essence in his body into the fake nascent soul that cultivated the inaction Dao scripture of returning essence. Clouds gushed out from Wu Qi's body, and clear air rose up, making him look like a celestial being. The monks let out strange cries as they slammed into the mountain. The force of the wind was extremely strong, and the force contained in the gale could bring despair to anyone. Among the 18 monks, apart from Arhat Baoxian, who managed to knock a hole in the lofty mountain with his formidable cultivation base and sprung out from the other side with a gloomy face, all the other 17 monks, including Arhat Baosheng, had their bones broken and tendons torn. 13 to 14 monks had their relics smashed on the spot and died miserably. Furthermore, there were many people who were waiting to be killed by the gale in the vicinity. Needless to say, Wu Qi knew that this rookie Gale, who had just reached adulthood, had attracted the seniors of his clan and attacked the army of Feng province led by Feng Jupin. Wu Qi breathed out a sigh of relief. Swaying, he put away the flaming magpie sword and was about to sit down and take a rest. But suddenly, the baby gale stretched out its claws and grabbed Wu Qi up. Then, it flapped its wings and soared up into the sky. The scripture of inaction emphasized the cultivation of one's nature and body, and the energy cultivated by it was pure, flexible, mighty, and boundless. Using the scripture of inaction as the foundation, Wu Qi circulated the sword technique of heaven-breaking sword Sek's 5-element sword technique, focusing on the third fire sword technique. Streams of sword energy kept bursting out from Wu Qi's body with a scorching heat. Gradually, the crimson bird hovering above his head transformed into a crimson sword beam that shot straight up into the sky. The ghastly sword beam emitted a dazzling light, making it look like a real sharp sword was hovering above Wu Qi's head. What troubled Wu Qi even more was the tremendous pressure brought to him by the Buddhist light. 18 monks were sitting cross-legged and their lips were not moving, but all of them were forcibly instilling Buddhist scriptures into Wu Qi's nascent divinity with the cultivation technique of the Buddhist League's heart connection. Around Wu Qi's ears, the 18 monks were chanting the Sanskrit scriptures, making Wu Qi feel dizzy and seeing stars flashing before his eyes, giving Wu Qi a headache. Arhat Bao Exen laughed mockingly and said, "You are indeed a bold dog. Aren't you just courting death by using the evil league's magic in front of us, a Buddhist cultivator?" All the monks present roared with laughter. One after another, they began to chant the name of Buddha while beams of various colors burst out from their palms, sweeping down towards Wu Qi in an overwhelming manner. The towering sword projection transformed from the flaming magpie trembled violently, producing sonorous and rumbling noises. Wu Qi had injected all his energy into the flaming magpie, but facing the Buddhist light unleashed by the 18 arhats, how could Wu Qi break through the golden light that surrounded him? A shrill cry rang out from Arhat Bao Sheng's relic. Just as the relic was about to turn into a blinding beam and flee, a gale that came swooping down from the sky reached out its claw and crushed the relic into powder. The earth element dragon scale shield let out a miserable wail as it suffered a series of heavy blows. Vaguely, it seemed like it could not withstand the forces coming from the outside, and was groaning as if it could not bear the burden. It looked like it was about to be shattered by the joint attack of the monks. Feeling helpless, Wu Qi exercised the mystic mist transformation technique from the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture again, transforming his body into a dense dark mist that drifted away in all directions, trying to evade the attacks from the monks. When he thought of the scene of Feng Juyen being besieged by a dozen adult Gale, Wu Qi could not help but roar with laughter. He turned to the Gale and said, "Are you here to help me? Ha! Do you still remember that it was me who saved you just now?" Wu Qi felt his entire body tensed up, and his muscles were twitching painfully. He felt as if several dozens of steel ropes were coiling around his internal organs, constricting them violently and making it difficult for him to breathe. Wu Qi reckoned that if this continued, he would have all his energy depleted in less than the time to finish a pot of tea. At that point of time, he would no longer have the strength to fight back, and could only surrender and let these monks do whatever they wanted. Arhat Bao Exen let out a furious roar. Suddenly, a bright beam shot out from his waist, and in just a blink of an eye, he vanished without a trace. While the few surviving arhats were about to flee, an adult Gale suddenly flapped its wings, shooting out invisible wind blades that shredded their fleshly bodies together with their relic. Arhat Bao Sheng snorted coldly, holding the Vajra subduing demon sword in front of him. A sheet of golden light burst out from the sword's edge, enveloping him like a golden bell. The sword of Greedy Wolf wheeled 13 times around Arhat Bao Sheng at top speed, hacking and slashing on the golden light for 360 times in a row. The golden light trembled and produced jarring metallic noises, yet it failed to break it. Shaking his head, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh. He fished out a few healing spirit pills and shoved them into his mouth, then said in a deep voice, "Cut the crap. Become a monk. I can't bear to part with my black hair, and I can't bear to part with the 3,000 secular worlds. Hehe, I think it's better for us to risk our lives." Arhat Bao Exen laughed in a low voice. The staff in his left hand flew out, transforming into a golden dragon that measured 1,000 feet long. Amidst a long cry, it clawed down towards Wu Qi's head. As for Arhatbao Xan, he performed the incantation gesture of Aquarius with both palms, one in front and one at the back, as if he was releasing an arrow from a bow. He gave a faint snort, and several dozens of tiny golden beams shot out from his palms, forming into a golden lotus flower in the air. In just a blink of an eye, they had arrived behind Wu Qi. Especially the dozens of adult gales, their bodies were stained with blood, and the blood was stuck to their feathers. Wu Qi could tell that it was not the blood from the gales themselves, but the blood that came from the outside. Obviously, they had just killed a lot of people. Before these monks struck, just the Buddhist light unleashed by them had suppressed Wu Qi to the point that he almost coughed blood. The chirping of birds could be heard coming from above. When Wu Qi looked up hastily, he saw a gale with a wingspan of nearly 10 miles falling straight down from the sky. Behind this gale were more than a dozen gales with wingspans of over 100 miles. One look and anyone could tell that they were already adults. These gigantic and majestic birds fell silently from the sky, their greenish-black feathers fluttering in the wind, giving them an indescribable air of elegance and otherworldliness. Laughing bitterly, Wu Qi revealed himself from the dark mist in a sorry state. His skin was ragged, and his body was covered with blisters and blood. The lethality of the Buddhist light on him had exceeded his expectation. He would rather be hit by Arhatbao Xian's staff several dozens of times than let the Buddhist light touch his body. With a strong taste of blood in his mouth, Wu Qi looked at Arhatbao Xian, who was glaring fiercely at him. He could not help but shake his head and say, "Are you forcing me to fight with my life?" Amidst the Buddhist light, there were vaguely countless heavenly warriors clad in heavy armors hovering in midair. They stood shoulder to shoulder, forming an impenetrable wall that wrapped tightly around Wu Qi. An enormous pressure came pressing down from all directions, contending with the razor-sharp energy unleashed by the sword energy above Wu Qi's head. Gradually, the sword energy was forced inwards, and Wu Qi could no longer unleash his sword energy, and could only hide it within the sword beams. Arhatbao Xian laughed evilly, then put his palms together and bowed to Wu Qi. "Fellow Taoist, you still have one more chance. Offer me all your treasures, then join my master and become an acolyte. With that, you won't have to suffer any physical pain today." Arhatbao Xian smiled faintly, shook his head and said, "Fellow Taoist, are you going to fight with your life? What a pity that the cultivation technique of Buddhism focuses on defense the most. Hinayana Indestructible Buddhist Light, Hinayana Buddhist Light of Deliverance, Hinayana Buddhist Light of Tranquility and Evil Subduing." 18 mystic Buddhist lights sprinkled down from Chi-Chi, hitting the dark mist that Wu Qi had transformed into. Wu Qi felt a sharp pain all over his body, while the dark mist melted quickly like snow being poured into boiling water. In just a blink of an eye, it had shrunk to about half of its original size. The cultivation technique of Buddhism was specialized in restraining fiend techniques. By exercising the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture in front of these monks, Wu Qi had unknowingly increased the lethality of these monks by at least 3 to 5 times. With a shake of his left hand, the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield unleashed 36,000 pieces of dragon scales, which shrouded him in a dazzling light. The golden specks reflected the sunlight and shone dazzlingly. Attracted by the innate Earth Element energy essence, a thick and solid Earth Element energy rushed out of the ground and transformed into a thick light barrier that enveloped Wu Qi. Chapter 464. Wu Qi lay comfortably in one of the gale's huge claws, allowing it to bring him higher into the sky. He believed that the gale would not bite the hand that fed it. Or, even if it did, what could Wu Qi do to it with the help of a dozen adult gale? The adult gale was a frightening existence that could hunt down a gold immortal true dragon for food. Let them do whatever they want, thought Wu Qi, who was too lazy to think about it. Layer after layer of clouds were broken through, and layers of astral winds were thrown down below. There were also heavenly flames, xian bing, boiling light current, star sand ocean, and many other natural hazards that could kill even gold immortals. The group of Gale carefully avoided these frightening things, bringing Wu Qi all the way up. They flew higher, 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 and higher. These gales transformed into gusts of wind, and a large gust of cyan wind carried them straight up into the sky. Their flying speed was nearly 100 times faster than the acquired magnetic sword escape technique that Wu Qi unleashed with all his might. With just a flick of a finger, they could reach a height of several thousand miles high. Just like that, Wu Qi flew for a full 6 hours, enjoying all sorts of marvelous scenes in the sky. Especially when they passed through a layer of thunderclouds that measured over 100,000 miles thick, Wu Qi could not help but be amazed by the strange and dangerous place created by the heaven and earth. There were no other impurities in this layer of thunderclouds, and everything was ruled by the purest energy of thunder. In this layer of thunderclouds, which was over 100,000 miles thick and covered an immeasurable area, lived countless strange creatures that looked like jellyfish, whose bodies were over 1,000 miles long and translucent. These magical creatures had been slowly stretching their beautiful bodies, gently waving their long tentacles that were wrapped in dazzling electric bolts. They were hunting a kind of caterpillar in the thunderclouds, which was 7 to 8 miles long and made of electric bolts, feeding on a kind of caterpillar. These gales' bodies were wrapped in a strong green gale as they flew straight through the thunderclouds. Slowly, these enormous creatures reached out their tentacles, trying to capture a few gales for dinner. Fortunately, the speed of the gale was too fast. Although these creatures were huge in size, their movement was too slow. As a result, Wu Qi and his company managed to avoid their attack and passed through the thundercloud belt with ease. Wu Qi suddenly recalled a frightening creature that was recorded in Scroll of Stealing, called the Mother of Thundercloud Lightning. This creature lived in the lightning and fed on the spirits born from the lightning. Every newborn thundercloud thundermother had the cultivation base of a heaven immortal, and an adult thundercloud, a giant creature that was nearly 1,000 miles long, possessed a destructive power comparable to a gold immortal. In the torrent of heavenly fire, Wu Qi saw a fire dragon beast with 6 wings on its back. It was formed purely from dazzling speed heavenly fire. In the Xianbing zone, Wu Qi and his companions were nearly killed by a centipede-shaped beast, which was over 10,000 miles long and had countless thin wings on both sides of its body. The heavenly centipede flew as fast as a gale, and the dark blue nether energy it breathed out from its mouth was extremely powerful, a frightening energy that could freeze the fleshly body of a gold immortal into ice crystals. One of the gale was nearly hit by the dark blue nether energy. Fortunately, its movement was much more agile than the heavenly centipede. After a series of violent evasive maneuvers, the gale brought Wu Qi safely out of the Xianbing zone. Amidst the torrent of light, Wu Qi saw the light wildebeest, which flew as fast as a beam of light. Amidst the star sand ocean, Wu Qi saw the extremely greedy star sandworms. They were strange creatures that looked like earthworms, but with a length of over 1,000 miles, and could stretch their body to over 100,000 miles long in the blink of an eye. They were attacking a true dragon, who came out of nowhere and was accidentally sucked into a huge vortex of heavenly star sand in the star sand ocean. The true dragon, whose overall strength was comparable to a lower-tier gold immortal, was turned into a dried corpse by the group of greedy star sandworms. Wu Qi had no idea how many such perilous zones they had passed through as they flew upward. After 3 days and 3 nights, the gale finally stopped before a boundless ocean of wind. Wu Qi looked down and saw the vast Pangu continent right before his eyes. Even with the mystic eyes of universe, Wu Qi could not see anything on the ground clearly. No matter where he looked, Wu Qi could not see the edge of Pangu continent. It was as if this continent had no edge at all. He took a deep breath and sighed with emotion at the vastness of Pangu continent. Suddenly, a melodious voice came to his ears. "Human cultivators, listen up." The dozen of adult gale shrunk their bodies at the same time. Their bodies emitted a strong light, and gradually, a dozen men and women with graceful and luxurious appearances came standing before Wu Qi. These men and women were handsome and beautiful, and there was an innate aura of nobility emanating from their bodies. They looked like lofty monarchs, so outstanding that no one dared to approach them. The one who spoke to Wu Qi was the woman who was obviously the leader among these men and women. She was clad in a long black robe and had a pair of eyes that shone like stars. She turned to Wu Qi and said, "Human cultivators, thank you for saving my only child. As a token of gratitude, we have brought you here. Go inside and search for your own opportunity. If you are lucky enough to find it, you will be rewarded with great benefits." She raised her beautiful and slender neck proudly and said, "I'm Lady Feng Qinge, the queen of the Green Feather tribe of the Gale clan. The one you have saved is my only son, Feng Yanxi. We, the Gale clan, have always distinguished kindness and hatred clearly. Those who bully our clansmen will be punished, but those who help our clansmen will definitely be rewarded by us." The little Gale, who had Wu Qi in his hand, gave a few coos, flapped his wings and slightly touched Wu Qi's body with the tips of his wings. Lady Feng Qinge puckered her lips and gave the little Gale a fierce glare, then helplessly shook her head and said something to a skinny man standing next to her. They were talking in the way of communication used by the Gale clan, so Wu Qi had no idea what their coos meant. The man took a step forward, glanced at Wu Qi from head to toe, and said coolly, "Young Master Feng Yanxi asked us to give you more benefits. After all, it was you who saved his life. Fine, I'll give you a little bit of the bloodline of the Gale between the heaven and earth. Whether you can enjoy it or not will depend on your fate." Suddenly, the fingernail on the man's right hand sprung out, about 1 foot long. With a gentle cut on Wu Qi's wrist, a green thread of blood slowly squeezed out from his wrist. Not long after that, a 3 feet long blood thread, as thin as a hair and emanating a powerful energy wave, squeezed out from the man's body. Carefully, he held the blood thread with both hands and handed it over to Wu Qi. Wu Qi was taken aback. He patted on Feng Yanxi's claw, then respectfully took over the green blood thread, which kept twisting and flying like a wild gale. A suction force came from his palm, and the blood thread squeezed into his body along with a whistling sound of wind, merging with all his limbs and bones in a blink of an eye. Hastily, Wu Qi exercised the technique found in Scroll of Stealing, using the technique of bloodline inheritance to merge the innate divine ability of Gale with his entire body. All the power contained in the bloodline was perfectly inherited by Wu Qi, without any waste. Only those who cultivated Scroll of Stealing could perfectly merge an external bloodline like this. If it were some other people, even if they were primordial immortals, it would be extremely difficult for them to achieve such an effect. After merging the green blood thread into his body, Wu Qi felt his body suddenly became lighter. It was as if his bones, flesh, meridians, blood vessels, and internal organs had turned into empty bamboo tubes, or feathers that were fluttering in the wind. There was a wild gale whistling through his body, and suddenly he had formed a magical connection with the wind between the heaven and earth. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes, his heart pounding vigorously. In Scroll of Stealing, there was a technique that could steal the bloodline of all kinds of divine beasts between the heaven and earth, merging their innate divine abilities into one's body. However, none of the divine beasts could be easily provoked. Therefore, the fact that Wu Qi could obtain the bloodline of the Gale for no reason was a great favor. Bowing respectfully at Feng Qinger's mother, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Thank you for the generous gift, Your Majesty. In the future, if the Green Feather tribe has any request, Wu Qi will dare to refuse." Feng Qinger smiled faintly, shook her head disapprovingly and said, "Never mind. We, the Gale clan, can fly freely above the 9 heavens, and we don't need you human cultivators. Come, we'll escort you to the core of this ocean of storms. Along the way, you can collect some wind spirit essence, which can strengthen the bloodline of the Gale in your body and improve your affinity to the wild wind force between the heaven and earth. The wind spirit essence is also an excellent material for crafting upper-grade immortal items. If you find it, don't let it go." After thanking Feng Qinger's mother, Wu Qi asked, "What is in the core of this ocean of storms?" Feng Qinger smiled faintly and said softly, "Nothing remarkable. It is just the mansion of a fallen primordial immortal. That immortal has some relationship with the Gale clan, So only the members of the Gale clan know the location of his mansion, am I right? Since you have saved Lao Ai, I'll give you an opportunity to obtain the treasures in it. Whether you can seize it or not will depend on your fate. Feng Xiaohou cooed a few times, flapped his wings, and grabbed up Wu Qi. Wu Qi stood on the huge claw of Feng Xiaohou, which was about 1 mile in circumference. A gust of strong wind rolled up everyone, and they flew straight into the boundless ocean of storms, which was composed of black, green, white, blue, and green gales. Goo-goo, goo-goo. Along the way, Feng Xiaohou kept rocking his head and making goo-goo sounds. But too bad, Wu Qi could not understand him. The bloodline of the Gale clan was extremely powerful. Snow-armored heaven-devouring pythons could transform into human form when they were around the 24th tier of Heaven Immortal. However, the members of the Gale clan had to possess the cultivation base of Gold Immortal before they could transform into human form and speak human language. With Feng Xiaohou's current cultivation base, he would have to work hard for many periods before he could transform into human form. The gust of wind brought Wu Qi and his company through countless storms effortlessly. After flying for 2 days and 2 nights, Wu Qi collected several hundred pieces of wind spirit essence, each the size of a small hill, green in color, and containing the supreme aura of Gale spirit. Not only could these wind spirit essences strengthen the bloodline of the Gale, but more importantly, they were excellent materials for crafting upper-grade immortal items. If they fell into the hands of a brilliant grandmaster of forging, they could even be used to craft gold immortal items. Suddenly, Feng Qinger came to a halt. Ahead of them, in a void surrounded by countless dark whirlwinds and vortexes, was a small landmass that measured about 1,000 miles in both width and length, hovering quietly in midair. There were mountains, rivers, forests, and grasslands on it, and on top of a lofty mountain in the center of the landmass stood a dilapidated palace that occupied about 100 acres of land. Feng Qinger grabbed Wu Qi and threw him into the palace. Chapter 465. Giving a strange cry, Wu Qi flew towards the small landmass in an arc. Along the way, the strong wind brought countless wind blades in all directions, but when Wu Qi flew past, the strong wind brushed past his body like the gentle hand of a lover caressing Wu Qi, not causing him any harm. Not only that, the strong wind even injected a lively force into his body, allowing Wu Qi to easily control his body. Like a fish swimming in the water, he flew across the nearly 100 miles of storm and landed safely on the small landmass. Feng Xiaoxiao cooed and gently patted Feng Qinger's mother with his wings. Feng Qinger rolled her eyes and gave Feng Xiaoxiao a few fierce slaps on the face. If you dare to run around again, I'll let you be killed by those mortals. I won't care about you anymore. Alas, with me bringing him here, and the Gale bloodline helping him control the strong wind, as long as his luck is not too bad, this treasure left behind by an ancient immortal will naturally be his. Feng Miao spread its wings, showing a look of disapproval. He shrunk his body, and the 10 miles wingspan bird shrank to the size of a fist. Like a chick, he hopped onto Feng Qinger's shoulder, cooed, and pecked her earlobe with his beak. Feng Qinger gave a cold snort, grabbed Feng Xiaoxiao with both hands, and pressed him down fiercely. Feng Xiaoxiao opened his mouth and let out a miserable shriek. His legs twitched and his eyes rolled back. Madame Feng Qinger kept yelling at Feng Xiaoxiao, then began to beat and curse Feng Xiaoxiao. Wu Qi landed on the landmass. From a distance, the landmass, which looked to be only about 1,000 miles in both width and length, suddenly became extremely huge. Wu Qi opened his mystic eyes of universe and looked into the distance. The edge of the horizon was over 100,000 miles away from him. This was a spatial restrictive spell constructed by a mighty immortal. This landmass was not as ordinary as it looked. Carefully spreading out his divine will, Wu Qi sensed the frozen wind in the surrounding air. Just like how flowing water turned into ice, the wild wind on this landmass was frozen in the air as well. With his divine will, Wu Qi could even draw out the outlines of the storms in the air. All the storms were frozen in the air, invisible and formless, and could only be sensed by divine will. Gingerly, Wuqi reached out his hand and gently touched the frozen wind that blocked his way. Green ripples emerged in the air, and Wuqi sensed a desolate and lonely emotion from the frozen wind. The Gale bloodline that had just fused with his body gave Wuqi a feeling of compassion for the frozen wind. He sighed lightly and said, "Do you really want to dance? The wind should be free and unfettered to soar between heaven and earth. It should not be like it was now, frozen in the air, unable to move, unable to be free." With a thought in Wuqi's mind, a gust of wind shot out from his fingertip and fused with the frozen wind in front of him. The entire landmass suddenly came alive. The air vibrated violently, while gusts of wild wind blew towards Wuqi from all directions. Wuqi's body was lifted up by the wind, dancing gracefully in the air. The frozen flowers, grasses, and trees on the landmass began to sway in the wind. Suddenly, they were filled with a life force, and the aura of life quickly emanated from them, spreading across the entire landmass. The strong wind lifted Wuqi up and brought him flying towards the palace located right in the center. Wuqi gently landed in front of the palace. Like a giant hand, the wild wind pushed Wuqi from behind and pushed him into the palace. This palace was built entirely from green jade. Originally, it had a few halls, but now, most of them had collapsed, leaving only broken fences and dilapidated walls, looking very desolate. Only the palace in the center was still standing. However, the roof of the palace, which was made from thin transparent green jade tiles, was punctured with tens of water tank-sized holes, giving off a sense of dilapidation. The strong wind pushed Wuqi into the grand hall. Suddenly, a bright light shone in front of his eyes, as a strong green wind came rolling and rolling along the ground, causing Wuqi's clothes to flutter violently. From the outside, the hall seemed to be less than an acre in size, but inside, it was over 100 miles in both width and length. Thousands of huge green jade pillars were erected in the hall, carved with countless patterns of whirlwinds and clouds. All the pillars seemed to be rotating along with the wild wind. The ceiling of the Great Hall was a mysterious heavenly cycle star chart. The dark sky and the bright stars made everything look no different from the real sky. However, because of the dozens of holes on the ceiling, dozens of large holes, about 1 mile in diameter, were exposed in the star chart. Faint sunlight shone into the hall through the holes, making the star chart obscure. A powerful force was maintaining the operation of some restrictive spells in the palace, which kept the interstitial space in the palace stable. Looking at the dozens of large holes on the ceiling, Wuqi then glanced at the ring space that was still intact and could only sigh inwardly. This place was indeed worthy of being the mansion of a primordial immortal, for it was indeed marvelous. Even though the primordial immortal had fallen, the mystery of this place was still not something Wuqi could see through. The wild wind rolled Wuqi up and pushed him forward. At the end of the hall, there was a cloud bed carved from white jade, and a faint, hazy figure was sitting cross-legged on it. Wuqi could roughly see that the figure was an old man with a thin face, with a pair of eyes as bright as the sun. But the aura emanating from the figure made Wuqi realize that the old man was not even a broken soul, and was not even as good as the wisp of soul left behind by Lady Dark Goldwater. This was just a projection. It was a projection left behind by the tremendous power of the fallen primordial immortal, leaving a mark in the orbit of the heavenly Tao. It was not a real living being, but it was, after all, the projection of a primordial immortal. Even though its master had fallen, it still possessed a very powerful power by relying on the various restrictive spells in the palace. Wuqi stepped forward, cupped his fist, and bowed to the projection. "Senior, I'm Wuqi. Greetings." The projection opened its eyes, stared at Wuqi, and asked in a deep voice, "Are you a good man?" Wuqi was taken aback. After a moment of silence, he shook his head resolutely and said, "I'm not a good man. But I'm not a bad man either. If someone does not offend me, I will not offend them. But if someone offends me, I will think about it day and night, and I will seek revenge even if I have to. You are not a good man." The projection smiled faintly, nodded, and said, It's good that you are not a good man. In this world, good people will always suffer losses. The projection sighed faintly, then gave Wu Qi an measuring look, and said in a low voice, "You have done the Gales a favor?" Wu Qi nodded, then told the projection how he saved Feng Xiaoxiao. Instinctively, he sensed that it was useless to lie in front of the projection. The Grand Hall was completely under the control of the projection. In this Grand Hall, the projection was an omnipotent god. If Wu Qi told a lie, he would immediately be attacked by the restrictive spells in the Grand Hall with all their might. After listening to Wu Qi, the projection smiled and said, "So, what do you think the wind represents?" Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then said with a frown, "Wind represents freedom. Only the freely flowing air can evolve into wind." The projection applauded and praised, then sighed and said, "That's right, the core spirit of the wind is freedom. I've been upholding the path of freedom, and that's how I was able to comprehend the mystery of the wind between heaven and earth, finally achieving the realm of primordial immortal. Unfortunately, the Eastern Green Emperor sent an ancient heaven god, Fengbue, to ask me to serve the Eastern Celestial Court. How could I be willing to be ordered around by someone?" "The Eastern Green Emperor?" Wu Qi took a deep breath. The projection sighed and said, "I refuse the Green Emperor's imperial edict, and the 10 wind gods, rain gods, thunder gods, and lightning gods working under the Green Emperor attacked me together. 40 ancient heaven gods joined forces and severely wounded the 7th wind god, the 3rd rain god, the 2nd thunder god, and the 1st lightning god. But the Green Emperor himself struck me on the back and killed me." The projection sighed and said, "When you grow strong enough in the future, will you avenge me?" Wu Qi frowned and pondered for a moment, then said frankly, "I'll do my best. If there's any danger, I won't take the risk to avenge you." The projection smiled, nodded seriously, and said, "That's very true, and I like it very much. That's great. Most of the treasures I carried with me when I was in a great battle in the past were destroyed. What I have left here are just some useless things. You can take whatever you like. I only have one scroll of the Song of Gale, which is what I've learned all my life, and the heavenly outfit of Gale, which is transformed from the wings I shed when I transformed into a primordial immortal. I'll leave these 2 things to you." The projection smiled faintly and said straightforwardly, "Freedom? But I'm just a projection, and I'm trapped here. How can that be considered freedom? Once you take these things away, there will be no trace of me left in this world. Everything will be clean, and all restraints will be removed. That's what true freedom is." With a wave of his hand, a green wind mass flew whistling out from the center of the cloud bed, struck between Wu Qi's brows, and quickly fused into his body. Wu Qi felt a cold current spreading out from his spiritual ocean, and suddenly an endless profound knowledge about the wind appeared before his eyes. All the knowledge about the wind, which the fallen primordial immortal had spent his entire life studying, belonged to Wu Qi. At the same time, wisps of green wind mass drifted out from the surrounding jade pillars. Gradually, countless green winds merged and converged above Wu Qi's head, gradually transforming into a pale green shadow of a wind. A gale about the size of a fist flew out from the shadow, gently wheeling a few times around Wu Qi. Wu Qi bit the tip of his tongue and carefully spat out a mouthful of prime blood essence. After a moment of hesitation, the gale flapped its wings and came before the drop of prime blood essence Wu Qi spat out, swallowing it into its belly. Abruptly, the shadow of the wind above Wu Qi's head transformed into a sheet of green light and fell onto Wu Qi's body. His Taoist robe was torn to shreds, and a green Taoist robe that was visible to the naked eye was draped over Wu Qi's body. The tiny gale gave a clear cry, burrowed into the Taoist robe, and fell into a deep sleep. Suddenly, Wu Qi received a message from the item spirit of the heavenly outfit of Gale. It was badly damaged in the war years ago, and now it was only a middle-grade immortal item. Although it was willing to serve Wu Qi now, in order to regain its original power as a primordial immortal treasure, Wu Qi would need to slowly nourish and recover it. Wu Qi nodded to himself, then cupped his fist and bowed deeply to the projection. The projection smiled faintly as a large number of green specks shot out of his body and slowly fused into Wu Qi's body. A powerful wind spirit aura rushed into Wu Qi's body. Every single cell of Wu Qi's was filled with an enormous power of wind spirit. It took a full hour for the projection to finally vanish. Wu Qi kowtowed a few times to the cloud bed, then strode out of the hall. Another debt of gratitude has been added to my debt. That's the Eastern Wood Emperor. Just the name alone tells me he's not easy to deal with. Wu Qi's bitter laugh echoed faintly in the hall. Chapter 466. A white cloud streaked across the sky gracefully, surrounded by a gentle breeze that carried it forward like a fish swimming in the water. Wu Qi sat cross-legged on the cloud, focusing all his mind on comprehending the Song of Gale, which was passed down to him by Reverend Gale, a primordial immortal, and learning the profound principles of wind that were as vast as the ocean. In Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, a green ball of wind was wheeling and turning, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly. Every time it spun, a new enlightenment would fuse into his mind. With every additional enlightenment he gained, Wu Qi's understanding of the changes of the wind between heaven and earth would grow a little stronger, and the bloodline of the gale in his body would grow stronger. In the end, the breeze kept going in and out of Wu Qi's body, pushing Wu Qi forward as he hovered on the cloud. His speed was even faster than that of an ordinary heaven immortal. Although it was not as fast as the gale, which could travel millions of miles in an instant, among heaven immortals, no one could travel faster than Wu Qi. The profound principle of the wind was freedom. The two wood elemental nascent souls in Wu Qi's 7 stealing heaven meridians were constantly swallowing and emitting a large amount of green light. The wood elemental energy was easily transformed into wisps of gentle breeze that flowed ceaselessly through Wu Qi's meridians. Wu Qi's body became hazy, as if he was about to transform into a gentle breeze that blended into the heaven and earth. The surrounding natural energy also turned into wind and flowed toward Wu Qi, quickly fusing into Wu Qi's body. The Song of Gale is indeed marvelous. Wu Qi opened his eyes and could not help but exclaim in admiration. It was a supreme scripture that could bring one straight to the realm of primordial immortal, and it was much more powerful than the Dark Een Water scripture, which could bring one straight to the realm of first-tier gold immortal. Currently, the two strongest cultivation techniques Wu Qi had were the Song of Gale and the Dark Een Water scripture. Although the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture could also be cultivated to the realm of gold immortal, it was still far from being comparable to these two cultivation techniques. If Wu Qi wanted to break the profound Een soul captivating seal in his sea of consciousness, he would have to rely on the Song of Gale and the profound Een Water scripture. A few days ago, Wu Qi searched the Gale Palace thoroughly but found nothing. Apart from the Song of Gale and the heavenly robe of Gale, all the valuables in Venerable Gale's Gale Palace had been plundered by the ancient heaven gods led by the Azure the Arch. Wu Qi had only found the remains of a few immortal stones in the Gale Palace's storeroom. This was all Wu Qi had found in the Gale Palace. After leaving the Palace of Gale, Wu Qi bid farewell to Lady Feng Qing'er and Feng Xiaoxiao. Lady Feng Qing'er sent an adult Gale to bring Wu Qi back to the surface while she brought the naughty Feng Xiaoxiao back to her clan to teach him a lesson. As for whether Feng Xiaoxiao was going to kneel on a washboard or something else, it was not something that Wu Qi could know. However, Wu Qi knew that even if they never met again in the future, he would always remember Feng Xiaoxiao. Riding on the wind, Wu Qi traveled back to Anhe City. He was not in a hurry and just drifted slowly along with the wind. He focused all his attention on studying the Song of Gale, and in just a few days, he had already comprehended some of its superficial mysteries. Then, he formed a fake nascent soul in his body, using it to cultivate the cultivation technique in the Song of Gale. The fake nascent soul was entirely formed from emerald green gusts, drifting and hazy. Among all the fake nascent souls formed by Wu Qi, its flying speed was definitely the fastest. When they were still several thousand miles away from Anhe City, Wu Qi released 4 celestial fiend puppets. 2 of them transformed into Shui Xian and Shui Yi, while the other two transformed into the two boys Wu Qi brought with him when he set out on this journey. The group of 5 returned to Greenwood Mountain in a leisurely manner. When they flew into Green City Manor, Wu Qi saw Taoist Yunzong, who was busy deploying various illusory formations both inside and outside the mountain. He was afraid that his senior brother, Taoist Yunzong, would learn about what happened here and come here to seize the credit. Therefore, during the period of time when Wu Qi was away, Taoist Yunzong had been working day and night to deploy various formations, trying his best to conceal the entire Green City courtyard. Wu Qi and Taoist Yunzong chatted for a while. With Shui Xian and Shui Yi as witnesses, Wu Qi actually sent a message to Reverend Li Yang through a voice transmission formation. Upon learning that Reverend Li Yang would be coming to Pangu Continent together with a few elders of Green City, Taoist Yunzong could not help but feel wild with joy. Taking advantage of Taoist Yunzang's wild joy, Wu Qi coaxed Taoist Yunzong with a false show of affection. After that, he came up with an excuse that he had to go to Anhui City to prepare for the grand opening ceremony when Reverend Li Yang arrived at Pangu Continent 3 years later. After bidding farewell to Taoist Yunzong, who was reluctant to part with him, Wu Qi brought the two boys and returned to Anhui City. Shui Xian and Shui Yi, the two Taoists transformed from celestial fiend puppets, stayed in Green City Manor, keeping an eye on Taoist Yunzang's every move. Along the way, Wu Qi retracted the two puppets back into his body, then leisurely walked into Anhui City with his hands clasped behind his back. As they walked along the main road, before they could reach the city lord mansion, an old man selling sesame seed biscuits and steamed buns suddenly pointed his finger at Wu Qi and cried out excitedly, "He is Taoist greed! He is Taoist greed! Ayah, he is Taoist greed! My lords, he is Taoist greed!" Wu Qi was taken aback. There were many people in Anhui City who knew his Taoist name, Greed. Why did this old man point out his name so excitedly? While he was puzzled, a large group of armored warriors suddenly rushed out from the restaurants and inns on both sides of the road. Dozens of oracles from the Directorate of Celestials, clad in black burlap robes and black jade crowns, flew up into the sky with gloomy faces. Quickly, they crushed the bone talismans they had prepared in their hands, sprinkling a large sheet of white light onto the armored warriors. Wu Qi briefly analyzed the restrictive spells in the white light. Some were used to defend against soul attacks, some were used to defend against poisonous gas and miasma, and some were used to defend against sound wave attacks, strong light attacks, and all sorts of strange magical attacks. In short, the over 300 armored warriors who rushed out from the restaurants and inns on both sides of the road were armed to the teeth. The offensive magical attacks that Taoists were most adept at using, which had the greatest lethality against human warriors, had been weakened to the extreme. The sound of swords and blades being unsheathed rang out like the rumbling of a tidal wave. 300 warriors had surrounded Wu Qi, their blades like a forest of trees and swords like a rain, reflecting the sunlight and glinting with blinding light. A few young men who did not emanate any aura, but were clad in golden armors and looked as mighty as lions, strode up to Wu Qi and gave Wu Qi a cold glance. A young man, who was wearing a golden armor and a large red cloak that was dyed with beast blood, had his hair tied up in a fiery jade crown on his head, and patterns of hundreds of beasts were drawn on his golden armor with melted red crystals. He took out a scroll from his waist, opened it, and looked at it carefully. Then he carefully compared Wu Qi's face with the portrait on the scroll. Shaking his head, the young man grinned coldly and said, "Taoist greed?" Wu Qi laughed dryly, nodded, and said, "That's me." The young man said coldly, "I'm Miao Yihu, the criminal officer of Zhong Province's punishment court in Diu. Please cooperate with me. Otherwise, I have the right to kill you on the spot." Wu Qi paused, then gave the scroll a sideways glance. The portrait on the scroll was the same face Wu Qi used when he went to Qingsu Immortal Pass. Next to the scroll was a line of tiny, neat characters: Taoist greed, a cultivation technique of the Fiend League, a height of 7 feet and 2 inches, and so on. Twitching his lips, Wu Qi turned to look at the old man, who was selling buns and steamed buns, and shouted out his name just now. The old man was happily taking over a heavy money bag from an armored warrior. Behind him, a group of men and women were busy loading some clothes and soft items into a large cart. Before long, the old man brought the group of men and women and quickly drove the cart away joyfully. Meanwhile, the owner of the shop was sighing in a low voice, lamenting why he was not the first one to discover the trace of Wu Qi, the Taoist greed. Smiling bitterly, Wu Qi pointed at his own nose and asked, "May I ask, Lord Miao, what crime have I committed?" Miao Yihu cried out coldly, "A cultivator from the Fiend League who calls himself Taoist Greed has colluded with demons from outer domains and attacked the army of Prefecture Overseer Feng Jupin. He killed over 70,000 soldiers of Diyu Province, severely wounded the Prefecture Overseer and his generals, and even killed 347 oracles of the Directorate of Celestials. The Prefecture Overseer of Zhong Province is furious, and he has issued an order to arrest Taoist Greed." Staring coldly at Wu Qi, Miao Yihu grinned coldly and said, "You are the 9th Taoist Greed that I've found in the last half a month." Taken aback, Wu Qi asked hastily, "What about the other few Taoist Greed that I've found?" Although Wu Qi asked the question anxiously, he was smiling bitterly in his heart. Could it be that the Taoist name, Greed, was so popular? If this Miao Yihu could find 9 Taoist Greed, then what about the other criminal officers of the punishment court? But when he thought about it, there were countless cultivators in the myriad of heavenly realms. Apart from the Taoist names of those famous almighty experts, who no one dared to use, there were many other Taoist names like Qing Feng and Mingyu. The Taoist name Greed corresponded to the heavenly star, and those cultivators from the Fiend League and the Evil League were fond of such Taoist names. Staring coldly at Wu Qi, Miao Yihu said in a deep voice, "The 8 Taoist Greed in front of me thought they had a profound cultivation base and refused to cooperate with me. Therefore they were all killed. One of them had a cultivation base of 34th tier Heaven Immortal, but he was still killed by me." Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath, laughed dryly and said, "Doesn't that mean I'll have to change my Taoist name in the future?" Miao Yihu said coldly, "That's a matter for the future. As for now, please summon your nascent soul out of your body, Taoist Greed. I just want to see what kind of technique you're cultivating." Wu Qi pointed at the words on the scroll and asked, "What if I'm unfortunate enough to be cultivating with a technique from the Fiend League?" Miao Yihu's lips twitched into a fake smile as he said in an indifferent tone, "Then, that would be really unfortunate. If you're cultivating with a technique from the Fiend League, you'll either be killed by me on the spot despite your stubborn resistance, or you'll follow me back to the punishment court of Zhong Province and be investigated." Wu Qi smacked his lips and cleared his throat. As he was about to say something bashfully, Reverend San Li's voice was heard coming from afar. "What a bold statement, Your Excellency. And He City is now Euphoria Heavenly Palace's territory, and you're trying to take away our outer sect elder in our territory? Where does Your Excellency put Euphoria Heavenly Palace? Where does Your Excellency put Patriarch Muji? Where does Your Excellency put Dark Palace?" When Miao Yihu arrived with his army, Wu Qi had immediately contacted the celestial fiend puppet who had transformed into Reverend San Lu. Reverend San Lu had arrived just in time, bringing with him all the cultivators from the City Lord Mansion who had a certain status. Riding on a gust of wind, nearly 1,000 cultivators arrived and surrounded Miao Yihu and his army of over 300 soldiers. Miao Yihu snorted coldly, then suddenly gave a sharp whistle. Immediately, many figures leaped up into the sky from a distance, as nearly 1,000 dark figures were seen rushing towards them from the 3 main roads behind the other 3 city gates. Before long, about 1,500 leather-armored soldiers, armed with powerful bows and crossbows, had surrounded the cultivators from the outside. Following these soldiers were over 100 oracles from the Directorate of Celestials hovering in midair. Chapter 467. The loud banging of doors and windows being shut could be heard coming from all over in He City. Grinning coldly, Miao Yihu spun and looked at Reverend San Lu, who was walking slowly down the street. He pulled out a round bone mirror and waved it at Reverend Sanlu. A faint gleam flashed across the surface of the mirror, polished from an unknown green bone, while an ancient-looking rune flickered on its surface. Suddenly, Reverend Sanli's body swayed, and a sheet of green mist burst out from his body, amidst which came a faint ghost howl. Shaking his head, Miao Ihu put away the bone mirror and said in a deep voice, "How dare a mere early-stage nascent soul cultivator talk to me like that?" He gave the crowd a scornful glance, then stretched out both hands and slowly drew a circle at the surrounding cultivators. "You are just a bunch of weaklings, and the strongest among you is merely a nascent soul cultivator. How dare you attack the army of Punishment Court of Diu? I'll count to 10, get the hell out of here." Reverend Sanlu snorted coldly as he parted the crowd and came next to Miao Ihu. He lowered his voice and said, "Your Excellency, Enhi City is now the territory of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. Our ancestral master is Patriarch Muji, and behind him is Patriarch Xian Yi from the Dark Palace of Hui Ming Heavenly Realm." Miao Ihu put down the hands that he used to provoke the surrounding cultivators, then placed them forcefully on Reverend San Li's shoulder. He came before Reverend San Lu, staring into his eyes and said with a cold grin, "This is the territory of Diu. The celestial court rules the immortals, and the human emperors rules the humans. This is a universally acknowledged heavenly commandment." Reverend Sanlu took a deep breath. He looked at Miao Ihu's hands on his shoulder, then sighed and said, "But now, Enhi City is the territory of Immortal Sect. If your Excellency does not wish to trigger a war between humans and immortals, please do not act recklessly in Enhi City." Miao Ihu's eyelids drooped as a strange smile emerged on his gaunt and slightly gruesome face. He loosened his grip and ignored Reverend San Lu, then turned to Wu Qi and said, "Taoist greed, let me have a look at your nascent soul. If you are a fiend cultivator, come with me. If you're not a devil cultivator, don't use the Taoist name of greed in the future. I'll let you off for now." Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then a white cloud rushed out from the top of his head. It was the fake nascent soul who cultivated the scripture of inaction. A crescent moon-shaped machete was hovering above the fake infant's head, looking hazy as if it was condensed from water vapor. Occasionally, the machete would spin and shoot out beams of bright light. The crescent-shaped blade was also a spirit weapon given to Wu Qi by Immortal Green Staff when he left Green Cliff Planet. It was forged using magical smoke cloud crystal and 5 elements gold essences, giving it a hazy and dreamy glow, a perfect match for the inaction scripture of unity. The Guyuan Wei Dao scripture was an orthodox Taoist cultivation technique. Moreover, it emphasized on cultivating one's nature and heart. It was in line with the most primitive essence of Taoism. As soon as Wu Qi's nascent soul flew out of his body, it was surrounded by a clear air, and clouds were hovering and dancing around his body in the shape of Ganoderma, dragon, and tiger. Wu Qi's long hair was waving in the wind, and he looked refreshed and energetic. He looked exactly like a genuine Taoist, an orthodox and virtuous man. Miao Ihu's face darkened abruptly. He gave Wu Qi's nascent soul sitting cross-legged amidst the cloud above his head a glance, snorted coldly, waved his hand, and cried out in a deep voice, "Heed my order, men. Form up and leave Enhi City." One after another, the armor-clad soldiers sheathed their blades and swords, loosened the triggers of their strong bows and crossbows, and put their weapons into the leather bags they carried on their backs. Then they lined up on the street and marched toward the city gate. The punishment army of the punishment court was well trained, and every one of them was an elite soldier. It only took them a few breaths of time to line up and leave through the east gate. Miao Ihu shoved the scroll back into his belt, smiled and nodded at Wu Qi. After that, he brought a few adjutants and personal guards and followed the procession out of the city. Off in the distance, 3 flying ships were seen heading toward Enhi City at top speed. They were here to pick up the army led by Miao Ihu. With a smile on his face, Miao Ihu led the army out of the city. But the moment he stepped out of the city gate, he turned his head and said with a loud laugh, "Reverend Sanlu, Taoist greed, remember, this is Diyu's territory. You are just staying here temporarily. Sooner or later, Diyu will take back this place." The 3 flying ships landed, and Miao Ihu boarded them with many soldiers. Amidst a faint whistling of the wind, the ships broke through the clouds and soared into the sky, then slowly flew toward the south. Footsteps were heard as Zhu Lingong, who stayed behind in Anhui City, came hurrying toward them with his soldiers. Upon seeing Wu Qi, Zhu Lingong quickly cupped his fist, bowed, and said, "Senior, was that the punishment officer from Zhong Province's punishment court just now? You have to be careful, as the people of punishment court never have a good reputation. Once you get tangled up with them, they will be like maggots on a tarsal bone. Things will not end so easily." Wu Qi was taken aback, then he smiled and said, "But I think that Miao Ihu is a reasonable man. I'm not a fiend cultivator, so he just left without any hesitation." Zhu Lingong shook his head with a wry smile and said in a low voice, "When did the people of punishment court ever talk about reason?" Looking at the bitter smile on Zhu Lingong's face, Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat. As Zhu Lingong's clan had lost their control over Anhui City, apart from Zhu Lingong and his branch who served as the city guards, the rest of the clan were exiled. Zhu Lingong should have a very deep understanding of the punishment court's methods. Judging from that, Miao Ihu would not let Wu Qi go so easily. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi smiled and patted Zhu Lingong's shoulder. "Beiji is doing well, and he is recuperating well in City Lord Mansion. Don't worry, I'll take good care of him. I'm sure he will have a bright future." While smiling, Wu Qi gave Reverend San Lu a meaningful glance. Reverend San Lu whistled, and all the cultivators scattered in all directions. Stepping on a cloud, Wu Qi and Reverend San Lu flew quickly towards the City Lord Mansion. However, halfway through their journey, Wu Qi summoned a celestial fiend puppet and transformed it into his image, following Reverend San Lu back to the City Lord Mansion. Meanwhile, Wu Qi himself transformed into a gust of wind and chased after the three flying ships. After obtaining the legacy of the Song of Gale, Wu Qi could fly at a very fast speed. In less than an hour, he had traveled over 10,000 miles towards the south. Far ahead of him, he saw three flying ships descending into a valley. A few plumes of smoke could be seen rising from the valley, and Wu Qi could smell the aroma of grilled meat and cooked rice brought to him by the wind. It was an inconspicuous valley amidst a vast mountain range. It stretched 3 to 5 miles, and there was a spring in the valley. Nearly 100 soldiers were grilling meat and cooking rice by the spring, while several hundred tents were erected in a small forest off to the side. Some soldiers were patrolling the area with swords and spears in their hands. The three flying ships descended, and Miao Ihu alighted from them with a gloomy face. He brought a few adjutants and personal guards into one of the tents. Wu Qi followed closely behind Miao Ihu, and with the innate earth element escape art, he entered the tent as well. He hid in the mud less than 3 feet deep under Miao Ihu's feet, narrowing his eyes to listen to the commotion above. There was a long table made of black stone placed in the tent, and Miao Ihu and his 4 adjutants were casually seated around it. A personal guard brought them a cup of boiling hot tea. Miao Ihu picked up the cup and finished it in one gulp, not fearing that it was scalding. After that, he pulled out the sword hanging on his waist and hacked it forcefully on the long table. A crisp sound rang out as the sword went over 1 foot deep into the table. Miao Ihu loosened his grip on the hilt, and the sword vibrated violently on the table, producing a deep, muffled cry. This Taoist greed is the one who His Excellency Prefecture Overseer ordered to arrest. Miao Ihu pulled out the scroll hanging on his waist and slammed it forcefully on the table. You have all seen it with your own eyes today. This Taoist greed's nascent soul is a nascent soul of Fiend League. Even if he is not that Taoist greed, he still has an unclear relationship with that Taoist greed. Chi-Chi, the 4 adjutants, rose to their feet, bowed their heads and cried out in a deep voice, "Your Excellency is right. This Taoist greed is the criminal His Excellency Prefecture Overseer ordered to arrest." Miao Ihu gave a deep snort. Sitting back in his seat, he gently scratched the edge of his sword with his finger while murmuring to himself, "Since this Taoist greed is the same Taoist greed, I have an excuse to mobilize the army and besiege Anhui City." Euphoria Heavenly Palace and Golden Pavilion Temple have perished together. Patriarch Muji is severely wounded, and Arhat Wrath is dead. Who else in the vicinity of Anhi City can fight against the great Yu army? Lightly tapping on the stone table with his finger, Miao Ihu said in a low voice, I knew that Lu Yi was not reliable. Tactics, stratagems, what is the use of these things? Power, only the mighty power can decide everything. If anyone dares to stand in our way, we will destroy him with violence. This is the righteous path under the heaven. Grinning coldly, Miao Ihu pursed his lips and said in a low voice, Third brother, watch how I will avenge you. Amir in his city has caused the death of my younger brother, who shares the same father and mother. How can I not avenge him? One of the adjutants cautiously reminded him, Your Excellency, with your current authority, you can only mobilize an army of less than 2,000 soldiers. This is more than enough to take down the current Anhi city. But, if Patriarch Muji sends out his disciples to help us, I'm afraid we won't be able to withstand his revenge. Hiding under the ground, Wu Qi narrowed his eyes. Miao Ihu was going to avenge his younger brother? Could his younger brother be the young general whom he had killed? At that time, Wu Qi was too lazy to find out the identity and background of that man as he was busy framing Yu Miao. Thus, he killed him with a casual swing of his sword. He did not expect that the man was backed by Miao Ihu, who was now eagerly coming here to avenge his younger brother by abusing his authority. Miao Ihu narrowed his eyes and shook his head. Let's take down Anhi City first, he said in a deep voice. We don't need to interfere in the rest. As long as we spread the news that Taoist greed is related to Patriarch Muji, His Excellency Prefecture Overseer will naturally uphold justice for us. The four adjutants exchanged a glance, then clenched their right fists and punched their own chests as they answered in one voice, Your Excellency is wise. We will definitely succeed. Miao Ihu smiled faintly. While he was about to reveal his overall plan, a loud explosion was suddenly heard coming from outside. A strong gust of wind brought with it a scorching flame, and the tent was abruptly caught on fire and burned to ashes. Miao Ihu sprung to his feet and glanced around. The valley had turned into a living hell. A black-bearded Taoist was seen standing on a cloud, holding a dragon skin fire pouch in his hand. He was constantly firing thunderbolts into the valley. Whenever a thunderbolt landed on the ground, it would produce a flaming cloud that covered an area of several tens of acres. Strong winds and scorching heat swept across the place. The armored soldiers were either ripped to shreds by the explosions, or their bones and flesh were charred by the scorching flame. Some soldiers were even howling miserably as they ran wildly in all directions, their skin and flesh crackling noisily, while the fat under their skin melted into human oil and flowed out from their wounds. Flustered and exasperated, Miao Ihu pointed his finger at the Taoist and snapped, Why did you attack us so cruelly? The Taoist smiled faintly, then gave Miao Ihu an expressionless look and said in a low voice, So, there are still 5 stronger ants? Not bad. With a wave of his hand, several dozens of thunderbolts flew whistling towards Miao Ihu and the others. Chapter 468. Miao Ihu could not care less about his adjutant and personal guards. Instead, he put his hands over his face and curled up his body. A plume of dark smoke towered into the sky from behind him, amidst which, the soul of an alligator, nearly 1,000 feet long, gradually emerged, howling into the sky. The dense water vapor in the surrounding air rolled and converged towards Miao Ihu, forming a thin armor compressed from water element energy and donning it. Dozens of thunderbolts the size of water tanks exploded, shredding Miao Ihu's adjutants and personal guards into pieces. Severed limbs shot out in all directions, and when the scorching flames swept across them, they were burned to a sizzling sound and turned into ashes in just a blink of an eye. The black-bearded Taoist let out a strange laugh as he unleashed a torrent of thunderbolts, turning the valley into a living hell. Nearly 2,000 soldiers brought here by Miao Ihu were killed, and only a dozen oracles with the strongest cultivation base were still alive. Protected by the bone talismans, they sprung into the sky amidst a large sheet of white light and attempted to flee. "You can't escape! You can't escape!" The black-bearded Taoist roared with laughter. He pointed his right hand out, and a dozen beams of flame shot out. Wrapped in each beam was a spirit talisman the size of a palm, crafted from a fire elemental energy stone of excellent quality, the Flaming Mist Stone. The thin talisman was densely carved with countless runes the size of mung beans and shaped like rising flames, emanating a powerful spiritual pressure. The talismans accurately struck the bodies of the fleeing oracles. The white light from the bone talismans was shattered by the talismans, and the talismans sank deep into the bodies of the oracles. Shrill and miserable howls rang out one after another, as dense and sticky red flames burned out of the oracles' bodies and slowly engulfed them. The red flames rolled silently, and the bodies of these priests turned into ashes in the flames. Arg! Arg! Amidst a furious roar, Miao Ihu, whose hair and eyebrows were all gone and his golden armor melted by the fire, leaped out of the flames. The alligator behind him transformed into a stream of dark watery light and fused with his body. Abruptly, he threw his head back and gave a long howl into the sky. His body grew to 50 feet tall, and his fair skin turned a bizarre greenish-black color, with patterns that looked like the scales of an alligator vaguely emerging under his skin. Die! Miao Ihu clenched his right hand into a fist, with the knuckle of his middle finger sticking out like a phoenix's eye. The fist pierced through the air as Miao Ihu used the force to protrude his body and appeared in front of the black-bearded Taoist in a flash. A sheet of flame spread out from the black-bearded Taoist's body, and a palm-sized shield appeared in front of his chest. It did not have a physical body, but looked like it was condensed from flames, constantly twisting and rippling. The shield was round in shape, and in the middle of the shield was a deep dragon eye. When the huge eyeball blinked, a large sheet of flame would shoot out, transforming into dozens of fiery serpents and biting towards Miao Ihu with ear-piercing whistling noises. Suddenly, Miao Ihu's body shrunk back to his original size. A dark fist force that shone with a blinding light burst out of his right fist and smashed viciously onto the shield. It was as if he had shrunk his body from 50 feet tall to 8 or 9 feet tall, forcing out all his blood essence to transform into the fist force and blast out of his body. A loud boom rang out, and a few large cracks appeared on the shield. The black-bearded Taoist gave a muffled snort as the corner of his eye suddenly cracked, with a dozen drops of bright red blood spraying out. The flame shrouding the black-bearded Taoist dimmed abruptly, as Miao Ihu's fist smashed viciously onto his chest. The black-bearded Taoist cried out in pain. His eyes went wide, and a large sheet of green flame burst out from his eyes. The blood that flowed out from the corner of his eye just now fused with the green flame, giving it a stronger power. The green flame stuck to Miao Ihu's skin like a piece of burning rubber, burning wildly. The temperature of the flame was extremely high, and no matter how hard Miao Ihu tried to control his beast soul and absorb the water element energy, he could not extinguish the flame. Wu Qi stealthily poked his head out from behind a rock and shook his head. The flame that sprayed out from the black-bearded Taoist's eyes was the prime true flame that he had cultivated with his life, the external manifestation of the yang energy of an immortal. The prime true flame was extremely powerful. Usually, when an immortal refined the prime true flame, they would only use it to forge their prime immortal items, or to defend themselves against fiends. Which immortal would be willing to spew out the prime true flame to attack the enemy unless it was a critical moment? Miao Ihu's punch had seriously wounded the black-bearded Taoist. The green flame burned quietly. Miao Ihu hissed and shrieked in pain, no longer having the strength to attack the enemy. His broken armor melted, his robe turned into ashes, and his skin turned into wisps of green smoke that drifted away in the air amidst the burning of the green flame. The flame quietly burned his muscles layer by layer, then his nerves, blood vessels, and bones. In just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, Miao Ihu's flesh and bones had turned into ashes, and his soul was imprisoned by the green flame. The black-bearded Taoist grinned hideously as he pointed his right finger at the green flame. The flame transformed into a bell-shaped halo and flew up into the sky. Right in the center of the halo was a fist-sized soul that looked identical to Miao Ihu. The flames slowly burned Miao Ihu's soul, causing him to keep letting out miserable and shrill howls. The howls could not be heard by human ears, and only nascent divinity could sense the shrill and despairing howls coming from the surrounding void. After a full quarter of an hour, when Miao Ihu's soul had suffered all sorts of pain, the black-bearded Taoist finally clenched his right hand and crushed the green halo, destroying Miao Ihu's broken soul. The black-bearded Taoist let out a strange laugh and said, "How dare you hurt my immortal treasure and my immortal body? Hee, having your soul destroyed is the lightest punishment. TSK, 3 flying ships." The black-bearded Taoist put away the dragon skin fire sack that was spewing out a boundless flame, folded it, and shoved it into a secret pocket hanging on his waist. Then he landed happily before the 3 flying ships that were parked in the valley. He patted on the ship and said smilingly, "Wonderful! These are flying ships made from flying cloud wood, a 3rd-grade flying ship. Flying cloud wood is also an excellent material for crafting flying chariots. Even if these 3 ships are dismantled and sold, they will be worth at least 2 immortal stones." Wu Qi blinked his eyes as he stared at the black-bearded Taoist. Could this man be a robber? While he was wondering where this black-bearded Taoist came from, Wu Qi's mind was suddenly alerted. He gave a cold snort and leaped forward, passing through the rock in front of him like a ghost. With a blink of his body, Wu Qi teleported himself several hundred feet away with a short-distance teleportation, then flipped his body and thrust out a dot of dragon-scale-shaped light. Amidst an ear-splitting whistling noise, the dragon-scale-shaped light had just flown over 80 feet away when a very fine red line came shooting over from the sky, colliding fiercely with it. Followed by a clear cracking sound, the dragon-scaled golden light was pushed back, while the red line was cut in half by the dragon-scaled golden light, turning into 2 broken needles that fell to the ground while emitting a faint white mist. Wu Qi spun and looked behind him, and saw a pretty and adorable little girl, who was about 7 or 8 years old, landing gracefully on the rock where he was hiding just now. She was clad in a moon-white Taoist dress that bared her fair arms. She had big eyes and a small mouth, making her look like a cute and adorable snow doll. Her hair was tied into 2 buns, and her mouth was pouting, while her eyes were quickly filled with tears. She stared at Wu Qi, then suddenly burst into tears and said, "Uncle Beard, he broke the 3 flame divine needles you gave me." "Ugh, the person who sneaked up on me is such a little girl?" Wu Qi quickly exercised his mystic eyes of universe and gave the little girl a glance. She was indeed a real little girl, with a cultivation base that had just stepped into Xiantian realm, and was just at the level where she could control a magical item. Not only that, she had an excellent bone structure and aptitude, and there was a ring of bright light emanating from her body. Obviously, she was practicing a very orthodox cultivation technique from the Taoist League, and it was a very advanced technique. Her bones were tender and fragile, and she was a real little girl, not a little monster disguised with the soul of a 10,000-year-old demon, and not a demon transformed from some mountain spirit or water monster. Her fleshly body and soul were tightly fused together, and her foundation was not shaken at all. Apparently, both her soul and fleshly body were original, and she was not an unlucky girl who was possessed by a demon soul or a demon ghost. Laughing dryly, Wu Qi raised both hands in the air and said, "Don't cry, it's just a misunderstanding." The black-bearded Taoist had come behind Wu Qi. He sneered and said, "Misunderstanding?" Wu Qi spun, nodded at the Taoist and said, "This little girl sneaked up on me with a flying needle, and I was just trying to protect myself." The Taoist was taken aback. His eyes went wide as he snapped at the little girl. "Xue Mei, were you the one who attacked first?" The little girl, Xue Mei, squatted down and played with a few pebbles on the rock with her little hands. She bowed her head and murmured, "I saw him sneakily peeping at you from behind the rock, and I thought he was one of those people's accomplices, so I gave him a needle. But in the end, I don't know what kind of powerful treasure it is, but it managed to cut the 3-flame divine needle." The black-bearded Taoist turned to look at Wu Qi, then suddenly cupped his fist and bowed solemnly. "Fellow Taoist, I am Supremacy 3 Flame from Wandering Immortal Hall of Myriad Immortal Alliance. Shui Mei is an orphan daughter left behind by my best friend, and I've been pampering her since she was a child. Please forgive me if I have offended you in any way. Likewise, Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed respectfully as he said, I'm, Taoist greed. Supremacy 3 Flame's expression turned extremely strange. He glanced at the broken marks on the ground, laughed dryly, and said, Taoist greed? Did you follow them here? Hee, your name has been resounding across Zhong province for the past few days. Shui Mei sprung to her feet, clapped her hands, and said with a smile, Taoist greed? The Taoist greed that the old prefecture overseer of Zhong province, Feng Lingling, issued an arrest warrant for? Shui Mei gave Wu Qi a pitying look, sighed, and said, over the past few days, Shui Mei has learned that a few unlucky fellows with the same name have been captured and killed by the punishment court. Some of them are called Fei Lang, Hei Lang, Qing Lang, and other Taoists with names related to the character Wolf, but they have all fled from Zhong province. Wu Qi laughed dryly, shook his head, and said, What an unexpected calamity. This is truly an unexpected calamity. While laughing, Wu Qi was pondering in his mind, what is the background of this Myriad Immortal Alliance? Myriad Immortal Alliance, Wandering Immortal Hall. Clearly, this Myriad Immortal Alliance is a decent organization. At least, its internal structure is considered complete. While he was pondering, Wu Qi was struck dumb. The celestial fiend puppet he left in Anhe City, disguised as his true form, had suddenly sent him a message. An immortal who claimed to be the emissary of the ascending immortal hall of Myriad Immortal Alliance had found Wu Qi's celestial fiend puppet and conveyed the intention of recruiting him. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.